Okay, sorry, we're live.
Okay. All right. So I sent him a text. I haven't heard back. Hopefully he's okay. He'll be logging in pretty soon. But I'm going to go ahead. We already called the meeting to order. Ms. Bell, can I get a roll call?
Hi, sorry. Good evening, everyone. Let's see. Mr. Ochapinti? Mr. Lee?
Here.
Mrs. Ian Garrett?
Present.
Ms. Tejada?
Here.
And Ms. Salahuddin.
Here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on through the agenda, we are holding on the Pledge of Allegiance until we get proper representation in the country and that they actually do care about all of our children. So the next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Dr. Deloria, do we have any items to add?
We do not. No changes tonight.
Can I get an approval of the agenda?
Move to approve. Second.
Awesome. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Awesome. The board met in closed session before this meeting and we have nothing to report out. Moving on to consent agenda. Unless anyone has anything they want to add or pull, can I get approval for consent?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, so with the approval of the consent agenda, we have now welcomed a new vice principal to Oceana High School, Mr. Bjorn Wickstrom. Welcome. Thank you. And he's here. I open the floor if you would like to address the body.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Salahuddin. I'm so excited to be joining the Jefferson District. I've been in education for 12 years. I was a full-time teacher and administrator last year at Woodside Middle School. So I've had the experience of teaching in this current environment as well as being an administrator. So I'm hopeful I can bring a bunch of those experiences and what I've learned to support the Oceana community. So I'm really excited to be here and thank you all for the opportunity.
No problem. Thank you so much. We are now moving on to public comment. Do we have any blue cards that are not related to the item on the agenda?
We do have 3 public comments tonight.
All right. Are they about the return to school plan?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so do we have any that are not on the item?
Okay, I'm sorry. No, we don't.
No, it's okay.
At this time. I'm sorry.
Awesome. So we're moving on to discussion items, which is the return to school plan. So I will turn it over to Dr. Deloria. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will ask Mr. Meyer to bring up our presentation to share with everybody.
It's going to be Ms. Baca tonight.
Okay. I am going to turn it over shortly to Ms. Baca. I'm going to take the first couple of slides, but while we're bringing this up, I just want to start this presentation expressing my pride and deep gratitude to the 50+ students, parents, and staff members who really worked well beyond what I've heard other districts doing, thinking very thoughtfully and in a slow process about what we need to have in place to support our students, our staff, and our families for a return to school model. You can be really proud that they really took the work seriously. And what other agency in this country has to respond so quickly and turn on a dime? And whenever there was a change, which was nearly every day, I would throw fastballs and sliders and curveballs, and still here they are tonight, making last-minute changes to conform with everything that's expected of us. So I'm just very pleased, and I think you're going to be pleased too. Just a reminder that tonight we're presenting our initial thoughts. We hope to get some feedback from you. I know we're still collecting feedback. And it's our desire to use your feedback and other to make any last-minute revisions to bring back to you on July 6th. So with that, can we advance the slide, please? So since we put the final touches on the plan, some things have happened. And first of all, I keep reminding everybody that we have got to get really comfortable with ambiguity, because depending on who you talk to, sometimes there are different rules and different thoughts. And really the decision making is going to be happening at the district level. We cannot be looking to the county, the state, or the federal government to make decisions about how we're going to reopen school. It's really up to us, which actually makes me feel more confident. I am far more confident with my staff making those decisions. I will tell you, and Ms. Baca is going to share data with you in a second. We've all heard in the news that our county data is spiking and trending up. Our state is many states are trending up. Many counties and states are slowing down their reopening. In fact, some of them are reversing the process. This past Monday, I guess that was yesterday, or last week, Monday, we had the second highest number of cases, 79, in the time that we were recording COVID cases. And you're going to see that Ms. Baca has a third time high that she's going to share with you. Also, new case and hospitalization data are trending up, not only in our county, in San Mateo County, but also in the state. In fact, the number of COVID, the new cases statewide was up almost 20% yesterday, and in San Mateo, it was up 57%. So the number of counties, including San Francisco, are slowing or reversing their pace. And then we also received, when the California legislature approved the budget for the next school year, attached to that is always a trailer bill, AB 77, and there was additional language added directed at how we were going to handle any students who are doing 100% distance learning. It doesn't affect our hybrid model, whatever hybrid model we eventually go to, but for any of those students who are opting to do 100% distance learning, there are some new requirements for that. Could I have the next slide, please? And this is what the trailer bill says. It says that there will be daily live interaction for our students. I added the for students part for clarity, by our certificated employees for the purpose of instruction, progress monitoring, and maintaining school connectiveness. So this interaction can either be by phone or internet, and anything that is allowed underneath health orders. And if it's not possible for our teachers to have that daily interaction with students, then you, the board, would have to take local action to state that. And with that, I think I'm turning it over to Ms. Baca.
No, you're turning it over to me. This is Monica Casey.
Hi, Monica.
Hi, I'm AFT 1481's president, and Corrine and I have been working a lot on this return to school stuff. There's so much information, it's almost ridiculous. I just want to put it out there to you all. Before we recommend or choose an option, we need to make sure that all decisions should be made with a safety and equity lens. Okay, so our objective is to present a bunch of stuff. We've gone over it, people. There's so much information out there. I just want you to understand. And I know you know this. There's so much information, but we really need to think about safety and equity. Okay. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So we have two parts to this presentation. Our first part is we want to help, obviously all the people that were involved are trying to help us decide what we're going to do on AHL, at home learning, or hybrid model, and what kind of schedules we're going to have. And the second part is that we had different focus groups thinking about things that we're going to need. This is totally different. What are we going to need to start back, regardless of how we start back? But what are the conditions? What do we do? How do we do it? How do we deal with the situations on campus? and the virtual learning. Okay, the next is these are the committee members. These were the people that were meeting. And then the highlighted people are the ones that are presenting tonight. So you can see there are a lot of different people involved. Thank you so much. And then there are a lot of other people that aren't named here that gave a lot of input. So you know that they're there. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. What the committee did together and what resources we've used are kind of listed here. So those of you who have this slideshow available, you can even click on some of these other resources we've used. We had several meetings, several smaller meetings to work on this, okay? And you know, there's a lot of surveys too, a lot of survey information from students, staff, and parents and guardians. Okay. I want to highlight just a few of the guiding principles here. Number one, safety and health of students and staff. That's one of our number one. One of the things I'm going to go off topic a little bit. One of the things from the AFT reopening guide and the CFT reopening checklist that I believe was included, they're recommending that we have tested everyone before returning to school so that we have some baseline data and so that we can have tracing and isolation as necessary. So, I mean, that's like way up there. Another thing I want to highlight here is number 5. We want to ensure equitable access. Okay. And number 6, flexibility. We all have to realize that this is going to go back and forth probably. So whatever we do, we need to be flexible and as best as possible, just be thankful that we have each other and that we can work through this somehow. It's not going to be easy, but we need to be flexible. And then number 11 is we've considered a lot of feedback from a lot of different places. So know that that's happened. And that's it for me for now.
Okay. Good evening, President Salahuddin. Good evening, members of the board and cabinet members. As you can see tonight, we have quite a few people that will be helping us present some of the information about what we had planned and just the school system in general. And it's such a complicated system. And we've brainstormed about how we go about planning for this. And we've come to realize that a lot of these parts are very independent, interdependent, and integrated. And what would really drive on how the others will work, it will really depend on how we do school. What is our instructional model and what will the schedule look like? So tonight we're gonna take you onto a journey, lots and lots of slides with lots of data on how we came about with our proposal for the instructional model and the schedule.
Ms. Baca, could you explain to the board how you're going to take breaks after each section so they can ask clarifying questions? And the discussion will happen at the end, likely after they hear public comments.
So I'll pause on some parts for some clarification questions. I'll stop the presentation and then you can ask those questions and we can discuss at the end. Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay, so the first thing that we discussed was, how do we get feedback from all of our stakeholders? So when Dr. Deloria had asked Ms. Casey and I to form the Return to School Committee, the first meeting was about Dr. Deloria providing an orientation to us on what the work will entail. With that, we were given the guiding principles. And what we had done was we asked the Return to School Committee to provide us with just to brainstorm ideas on what schedules would look like. And so several people met together. Some of them met with, another person and just came up with 6 different schedule options. And the schedule options vary all the way from very, very restrictive to the least restrictive part. And with that 6 schedule options, what we did was we asked for the return to school committee to talk amongst their groups. They were divided into small groups, discussed, and then we asked them for a vote. We also asked them to come up with a feedback, a narrative feedback within the group. And not only that, we also asked all of our staff members to vote on the schedule options that they would prefer and provide us feedback. And on top of that, our return to school committee and our AFT leadership met staff at the school site level to really discuss and talk about how the schedule will impact students and teachers. And with that, we ended up with 2 schedule options. So I'm going to share again, all of the data, how we came up with the 2 schedule options in the next few slides. Now, with the 2 schedule options, what we did was we asked all of our staff members to vote. We also asked the students and the parents to vote. We got some feedback and discussion with staff members. And of course, we look at the county and CDE guidance. And so tonight we'll be presenting our recommendations to you. And once the board approves the plan on July 6th, what we would like to do is to start implementing the schedule and the model, as some of this work will require a lot of master schedule work. And once we have the plan, as what Ms. Casey said, we need to be really flexible and adjust as needed. So this is just a summary again of the timeline on when we had started. And as you can see, this timeline is, quite aggressive, and things are happening so fast, and things are, being thrown at us so quickly. So we need to really adapt and adjust to the current guidance. So again, I'm going to talk about the feedback on how we narrow down the 6 schedule options into 2 schedules. So we looked at the student survey that was created by our student advisory and our student trustees. And we picked some of the questions and that helped us inform on how we were going to narrow this down. So the survey was taken by 827 of our students. 70% of these students are not enrolled in an AP course, and 88.1% did not hold a job. So who responded to the survey? As you can see, we have Westmore High School with the highest percentage, and then followed by Jefferson High School, and then Terra Nova, and then Oceana. So it's kind of typically representative of our school population right now. Now, this table shows you the number of participant representation for each of the school sites. So how many of the Jefferson High School students participated? What is the percentage for Oceana students, Terra Nova, Thornton, and then Westmore? So with that survey, one of the questions that was asked was, how heavy was your workload? So this is how the students responded. With 1, I had barely any work, and 4, I had much more work than usual. And as you can see, it's leaning towards more about having more work than a typical or normal school day. The other question that was asked was, rate the level of your overall engagement. And this is how our students responded. With 1, did not attend classes or do any work, and then 4 attended every class and did all the work. And as you can see, 2 of the ones that responded, most of the students, attended every class and were pretty much engaged. There were also questions on which aspects worked well or improved during at-home learning. And as you can see, the 49% or 403 of the respondents said that the emails and the information updates from staff members worked really well or improved throughout the semester. The next question was, what was the greatest challenge you faced? And our students said, having that personal engagement, 26% of them, but that really meant attending class and keeping up with work. And the other question is, what is part of the AHL that could be improved? And this question, if you see the first and second bullet, this is basically like very, very close. Sometimes it's 24%, 26%, it just fluctuates. It's basically right now, when I pull this, the data is 26% of making communications with teacher easier. And they thought that the structured schedule was, could, really, really be improved. We also look at some of the student comments. So these are actual student comments from the survey. And here's one response. Teachers give us more than one assignment and we have 6 classes and it's just hard to focus on one assignment. I always have to multitask and the lack of sleep because of the AHL schedule. I would rather learn on paper than on technology. I missed school and being in class. It needs to be more consistent. I had some teachers with mandatory classes 5 times a week, even after the new schedule. And the others that I have never met over video that just posted resources in Google Classrooms, no assignments. A lot of work. I was very stressed. I think more teachers should have virtual meetings. It was nice to have an actual connection with classmates and teachers and easy to ask questions. Also, the fact that teachers were giving more work than usual. Most teachers accounted for the time it takes to do their work, but they failed to account for the time of the workload of the other teachers. Some teachers gave too much and some gave little to none. But please try to consider that students now have to balance our home lives with school lives now. We just can't sit at a computer all day like most teachers expect us to do. We have to cook, clean, and look out for others. A shorter workload would help all. My 3.2 GPA dropped to a 2.0 due to this hard time. I tried really hard to attend all meetings, but it interfered to my job outside of school. Since my family lost the opportunity to work, I was a source of income. If these new ways have gotten me facing problems in school, school ended up being confusing and unfair of my time. So these themes are very, very common in what our students had suggested. So what really concerned me with these comments is that there's just been a lot of stress from a lot of our students. So the next one, we're gonna go over the parent survey, but I wanna stop my screen for a second to see if there are any questions or clarifying questions.
Missing Garrett.
Sorry, hold on, Bryce, hold on. So I just wanted to ask what kind of PPEs will be available for the teachers when they return? Bryce, stop.
I think we could get into that, but I don't know if this section of the presentation around the student survey.
We're going to talk about that shortly.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. So sorry, I'm distracted.
That's okay. Mr. Ochapente?
Yes, thank you, President Salahuddin. I just one quick question on the student comment about the GPA dropping. I'm sure we'll discuss this in more detail, but maybe just to point out, with GPAs dropping at that rate with students who are working, I hope that's not prevalent or that's a pattern or trend, but I know something that we addressed in prior meetings in terms of being considerate of student situations, especially if they're working, that means they're an essential worker, So I think there should be some exemptions and some kind of things we should apply towards daily interactive connectedness, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But if there's anything you want to mention regarding that now, I just want to throw that out there.
So I believe that comment was before we had decided what we were going to do with the grades and the policies. And there was a misunderstanding that, that GPAs from the second progress report would go down. And I think that was the, misunderstanding of the student thinking that their GPA would actually go down and, but it didn't.
Trustee Lee?
I think just to add on to Ms. Archipinti's question, I think, we've got 12% who responded who said that they have a job or had a job during AHL. So, this is them thinking about, their comments on slide 17. So my question is, how do we create a structure that is equitable for the students who have to work during the day? And, and the other pieces from some of these comments, it seems like there's definitely going to need to be a consistency in the number of assignments that are assigned, because obviously in this environment, it just seemed like, clearly the students were feeling pressures from different courses.
So that is why one of the reasons, our committee had chosen to schedule is just that consistency of, okay, I will be on site Mondays and Wednesdays or whatever those days are, so that, if they work, they can say, okay, I will not be available between 8 and 12 during these days. Because one of the 6 schedule options that was presented was actually a rotating schedule. And that made it really hard for some of our students that are working, that, all of a sudden, oh, week 1, I'm in school here, but week 2, I'm not. And then, so, back and forth. So we did take that into account. And as far as the consistency of, how much work a teacher provides, we will be working with the curriculum and instruction team as far as, providing professional development and really looking at the amount of workload and the inequity of, one class over another. Because again, this is, a really stressful time and we need to accommodate what our student needs are.
So I have a couple of comments. The first one is in the student responses, students that don't attend class don't complete surveys. So there's a huge swath of opinions that are probably missing from here that we just need to be mindful of. Like I take these comments and I appreciate student comments, but I always take them with a grain of salt that they're only representative of a certain subset that have time and access to online to complete the survey. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and I brought this up before, is that as a student myself who had a full-time job in high school, I would have appreciated my school stepping in and telling my family at that time, which wasn't that great, that she should not be working that amount of time. That there should be more emphasis on going to school. And if we were in school in any regular time, it wouldn't be allowed for a student to work during school hours. So I think that I understand that times are hard and people are struggling, but at the same time, I don't know if we should just completely acquiesce to students working during school hours, because the short-term gain for their family is a long-term loss for the student of not being able to engage in whatever education we're offering at the time as fully as their counterparts. So I don't know if there's something that could be done. And then especially the jobs that they're doing are putting them in harm's way, and they're usually the subset of group that is most susceptible to COVID-19. So I just think that if there could be more emphasis on if students need to be able to participate in school during school hours. And that's just my opinion on that.
So we work with our site administrators and also our wellness counselors and, social workers to see, if there is a family need, maybe, if there's a way we can help, and we can also communicate again, the importance of being at school and doing school. In the long run, it is, a bigger investment than what it is now. So it is something that we can work with. Okay, so I will move on to the parent survey. Okay, so around the same time that the students took the survey, parents were also given the survey. The survey was also translated in multiple languages as well. So with this, we had 562 participants, and about 13% of our students or households. We just assumed that there would be one response per family. So that's about 13% of our population. And this is the participation and breakdown for each of the school site. Again, Terra Nova had the highest participation, followed by Westmore High School, and then Jefferson, and then Oceana. We also asked just some demographic question. We wanted to know, as part of creating, narrowing down our schedule, what is the percentage of families that are taking public transportation? And out of the 562 that responded, 174 of them are taking public transportation. So we really need to take into account the AM and PM, because that was one of the proposed schedule, is that we have a cohort in the morning and then we have a cohort in the afternoon. But I know that what got a lot of people worried is that, how about Samtrans? Will they, will there be routes in the morning and the afternoon? And that's one of the reasons why the AM PM cohort was not very popular, because of the transportation. We also asked about having students attending multiple schools in our districts. And, this was actually a little surprising to me that, we have families attend, like quite a few, 22% of our, respondents have families, 125 of them in multiple schools. So we need to take that into account as well. And then we also look at families with siblings attending our partner school districts. And as you can see, about 30% of the participants have siblings either at Bayshore, Jefferson, and Pacifica School District. We also wanted to know if they had sufficient devices at home, and 90% of them said yes. And then as far as the internet, 95% of them said that, there's a reliable internet. But like, I always think about the participants again. Like, we only have about 13% of the households, participating. Yes, this looks high, but what about the others? So I feel like we really need, to do a good job and better job making sure that, our families have access to devices and a reliable internet access, because doing at-home learning is impossible without these two things. We asked our parents also their overall satisfaction with the at-home learning, with 1 very unsatisfied and 4 very satisfied. And as you can see, the parents that responded were overall pretty satisfied with the at-home learning opportunities provided to the students. And then there was a question asked about, was there too much work? Is there too little work, or just amount of work? And 52% of the respondents said that, they felt like it was just right. However, 34% felt that it was too little. And 14% said too much. So when I look at this, there's kind of like, a polarity with what the students think and what the parents think. And I just want to, take it like personally too. When my daughter does her work, she thinks it's too much work. And for me, I was like, wait, that's not enough. So, there's that perception of how much, work, really is. But from the students' perspective, they're feeling really stressed out. So I think we need to really take that into account. The other question that we ask is, based on the information you have now, how comfortable are the parents about sending their students back to school if we practice social distancing? So 1 is comfortable and 4 not comfortable, and not by a huge margin, but most of our parents are comfortable about, sending their students back to school. Again, this survey was sent out at the beginning of June before all of the spikes. So this is how they felt at that time. For the ones that felt uncomfortable about, sending their students back to school, we asked them for their top reasons, and 64% of them said that they just don't think that it's safe enough to be at school. And about 32% said that someone at their household has a documented health risk. And this is the initial survey again, basically asking, would you prefer at-home learning or a hybrid where they're in person and then distance learning at the same time? So 52% of our parents said that they would prefer their students to come back to school, socially distanced in-person learning, and 36% at home learning, and about 12% would, just didn't care either way. So with that, so we gathered the parent feedback, and then we also asked again, our return to school committee and then our staff. So 27 of our return to school committee voted. We also got feedback from 8 of the groups, their narrative feedback. We sent the survey to the staff. We had 136 staff votes, 129 comments, and lots of site meetings. So Ms. Casey and I probably spent close to 5 hours looking at this data and really, figure out what are some of the common themes. So these are the considerations in narrowing down our schedule. Whatever we chose, we had to make sure that our schedule is flexible enough that if, the government says, CDE says, we can't, you have to be all at home learning, that we can just flop at home learning with their current schedule. So it had to be really, really super flexible. We can't be inconsistent because that will create a lot of confusion for everybody. And again, just that consistency again, if you're Monday, Wednesday, they want to say, okay, this is my Monday, Wednesday schedule. They don't like that, they're rotating every week, every other week. Having less students on campus at one time was also a common thread. Of course, like what Ms. Casey is saying, that, safety and health of our students and staff is very important. And we need to make sure that we have, can't have all of our students on campus, and they're looking for just, feeling safe and having not many students on campus. Having a reduced student and teacher workload has also been a priority, because it's very stressful for, having teachers to prep for 6 classes and also having students, take the 6 classes. It was just too much for them at that time. And of all of our surveys and our feedback from our staff, Schedule 2 was the #1 vote for all of our staff. So Schedule 2 right now, again, is one of the schedules that we are proposing. Is a modified version of it, but that is what our staff had chosen as their #1 pick. The other consideration is that we had to make sure that there's an intervention period within the schedule. So if you look at the proposals, there's the Wednesdays where there could be office hours, and there's also some time in the afternoon after lunch where there could be an intervention period built in. And then a lot of our stakeholders felt that a minimum day would work best, because what they would like to do is, students could just leave campus after lunch, but if they need to stay for intervention period or 0 and 7 period, that they'd be able to attend. So those are the considerations for narrowing down our schedules. So I'm going to stop there for some clarification questions.
Anyone have any questions? Mr. Ochapinti?
Thank you. Yeah. So thank you for all that. That was very helpful. Thinking from the considerations, consistent cohorts. We know obviously high school is very different from K through 8, or at least K through 5 elementary. How, maybe we'll get to this later, but how consistent in terms of number or in terms of like a small learning community kind of bubble? What do we mean by consistency?
Dr. Gloria, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'd like to answer that question right now, Mr. Ochapinti, because I think everybody's heard all kinds of new vocabulary. So originally in April, Dr. Morrow kept using the word bubble cohort. And if you're watching any of the professional leagues right now, basketball, but they're talking about organizing the same people, and that mixture never changes. So in the summertime, the emergency regulations for childcare required a bubble of the same, at most 12 students with the same one adult, and you couldn't mix them. And if you did, then everyone had to be quarantined for 2 weeks. Well, obviously that doesn't work really for it doesn't work for elementary school if you've got more than 12 students in a classroom, and certainly doesn't work in high school because the students that you have first period don't necessarily march to their next period with the same students. So a new word was introduced. It's not a clinical term, but the idea is a stable cohort, and it's a relative term. So when Ms. Baca was talking about finding a way to limit the number of students at school in any day or in a class, that means that those same students come on the same days to the same teachers with the same students. And to carry that stable cohort for even further, if a teacher decides to group students in small groups in class, once you form a small group, it can't change. So a group of 4 will be the same group of 4, which is a little different. We're used to kind of reorganizing our small groups based on student need. So we're not doing bubble cohorts. We have too many students to do that. So I hope, did I explain that well enough for everybody? I'm looking at Ms. Boswino. How did I do? Thank you.
I think too, one of the core pieces that's different is that for the professional teams, they're not leaving their area or with a hotel that they're assigned, and they're not interacting with anybody else. That is not the case for us. You know, as soon as the kids get off campus, who knows what they're going to do? Who knows where they're going to go? So I think that's one key point of distinction that we need to point out, that the bubble cohort is only on campus, and I don't see how that is a successful model when we're not Hogwarts, like they're not sleeping here.
Yeah, I just want to clarify for everybody, we are not doing bubble cohorts. So the up to 16 students or whatever we decide, whatever models decided, those students in period 1 are not the same that are meeting in the next period. We're not doing bubble cohorts. So I wanted to be clear on that. And this is probably a good time to remind everybody that although you're going to see a lot of ideas tonight, I'm looking at that data every day. President Salahuddin is working with the county to get it so that we can disaggregate our daily city and Pacifica data. But I'm going to be looking at that data, and as long as it's trending up like it is right now, you should be expecting we'll probably start in all distance learning. And I'm hoping I can call that on August 3rd, make a decision so people know.
And that was going to be my comment, is that, you know, I'm appreciative of parent data as well, but they don't have all the information that we have, and that we have been in multiple conference calls with Dr. Moreau. And, you know, he is painting a completely different picture than the one that the county is painting. And the uptick in infection rate is by design, right? He's been very clear about that on the call, that he wants folks to get it. So that, you know, I mean, I think the other board members have commented, I mean, that call is resonated with me and haunted me a little bit about, you know, what we can expect and what's going to happen moving forward. So, you know, I appreciate the parent feedback and I understand the frustration with at-home learning, but I also feel like we really need to talk about it, not, you know, what happens when school opens, but what happens if we open, and that there's a very good possibility that we'll be opening at home. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Take it away again, Kareem. Ms. Baca, you're muted.
Okay, yay. All right. So with the two schedules option that we presented, we gave a survey to our staff at first, and then we asked our parents and guardian and then students. So this participation rate is an approximation because the denominators, is changing depending on, when you look at it. So this is an estimate participation rate. And the assumption for the parent and guardian is that there is one entry per student. So as you can see, Jefferson High School, 20% of our parent guardian student is about 20%, staff is about 59%. There's Oceana, Terra Nova, Thornton, and Westmore. Okay. And what we even did was we broke it down as far as staff. We looked at how did the administrators respond, how did the certificated staff respond, and how did the classified staff responded. And as you can see, the certificated staff response was pretty high, which I'm pretty happy because we typically don't get this participation rate from staff members. So again, Ms. Casey had done a really good job in promoting the survey and making sure that voices are heard from our staff, especially our teachers who will be with our students every day. So the survey had two questions generally. The first question was, would you prefer at-home learning or would you prefer being on site and doing a hybrid model? So this chart shows the red one is that the preference is at home or distance learning, and the blue one is the hybrid learning where they're on site. And as you can see, this is a combined data for students, parents, and staff district-wide, and 70% of our stakeholders want to be on site. Because we miss our students miss each other, and we just want to be back to normal. So this is broken down by stakeholder group district-wide, and this is a very similar pattern where being on site, a hybrid is the preference for both parents, students, and staff. This is broken down by each of the school sites and then by students. And same trend that you can see, most of our students, basically, and all of the school sites would prefer, except for Thornton High School, would prefer an on-site hybrid. This is the results for the parents. And same thing here, where an on-site hybrid is a preference from all of the parents at the school site level. And the staff members too would prefer an on-site hybrid as opposed to at-home learning. So the findings is that overall, about 24%, 24% of our parents preferred, the participation rate of all of this. So 24% of our parents, 16% of our students, and 62% of our staff basically would prefer to start in a hybrid model. All stakeholders prefer the hybrid model, and that all comprehensive school sites prefer the hybrid model. So based on this,
hold on,
this is, again, this is a survey.
Can you go back to the one before?
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to mention that's not in here is that there are still those, both staff, student, and parent guardian that don't want to go back at all. So there are people that feel strongly about not going back at all. You know, it's a smaller percent, as you saw before, but there are still those people. So I just wanted to make sure we hear that those people exist. Sorry, go ahead.
So again, that's, you know, the parent survey, student survey, staff survey, but what Dr. Delory had mentioned earlier is that what we are going to do is really look at our data and use that as a metric to determine whether we're going to start virtually or in person. So this is the most current case as of today, or should actually say June 30th. This is actually, it was pulled today, but the data was from June 29th. So we had 71 new cases, and this is the third highest day ever since we had started shelter in place. You will also see, here's the information for Daly City and Pacifica on the number of confirmed cases, and then the number of cases for every 10,000 residents. And as you can see for Daly City, it's pretty high. For Colma, Broadmoor, and Brisbane, it's less than 10, so we don't have that information right now. And the other piece of data that we'll be looking at is the hospitalized patients. And as you can see, most recently, we have had 32. So that's, again, the data that we will be looking at on whether to determine if we're going to start virtually or we're going to start some form of a hybrid model. So
and again, can I just say something? Sure. That I think that there are districts, their CFT and the AFT are recommending that we do make a decision sooner than that to go ahead and start with distance learning, just for the safety of everyone. So of course, just throwing that out there as well. Go ahead.
So again, even though the preference is a hybrid model on the current data trends, we really need to look at the data from the county, and not only just the county, but also, you know, in Daly City and in Pacifica, and of course, if there are any local cases here at the school district. So what we recommend is that, you know, we're taking many steps between AHL and any hybrid plan that starts with bringing our least resource students first. So we still need to work on this, but we are thinking about with the schedule presented is that we start out with, if we were to start with, you know, fully at home learning, that we bring few students in. So we've discussed that perhaps our English learners, our students with IEP, and our 9th grade students will be the first group to come in, and then we'll slowly bring the other grade levels in once it's safe. And again, we will use AHL as a first way to build capacity with effective distance learning strategies. So we will be using, if, you know, when we start AHL, we need to do a lot of professional development for our staff. And also we need, of course, to train our students as well. And finally, what we would like to do is give parents and guardian a choice on whether they would, you know, prefer to keep their students at home or if they're okay with sending their students, given that, you know, we're out of AHL. And for the ones that are doing completely at home learning, we're thinking of using Apex as the main platform for the ones that are not being on site. So I'm gonna stop there for clarification questions.
Any questions or clarifications? Nope, go ahead.
All right. Okay, survey question number 2. As I mentioned, we are down to 2 schedules. So I'm gonna go over briefly on what the schedule looks like. So schedule option 1 This is basically a quarter system where the 6 periods are divided into 2 9-week periods. So the first 3 periods will happen during the first half of the semester, and the second 3 periods will happen at the second half of the first semester. How this would look like is that at the beginning of the day, we will have some, a temperature check for all of our students, and instruction doesn't start until 8:30. And for most students, it will end at 12:50 in the afternoon. What happens in between, the sites will have to figure out depending on what their structure is. So for instance, we will probably consider a nutrition break throughout, between 8:30 and 12:50. Oceana has this advisory period, and some staff members in schools are thinking of either shorter passing period or longer passing period, depending on how their school works. And then from 12:50 to 1:20 will be lunch, and there'll be a designated area on campus for lunch, but for most of the students, it will be dismissal. However, in the afternoon, if a student has a 0 or 7th period, they will be taking those classes. But at the same time, this time period could also be used for some intervention period if they need to. For Wednesdays, we have our flex time office hours, again, built in for intervention period. And on Fridays, we will have virtual learning for all cohorts. I'm actually going to go back that for this model, the class is divided into 3 cohorts. There's cohort A, cohort B, and cohort C. So when cohort A is on site on Monday, cohort B and cohort C will be doing asynchronous learning where they will be doing independent assignments. And then when cohort B is on site, cohort A and cohort C will be doing asynchronous learning. And then Thursday is cohort C. And again, Friday is all virtual, and all cohorts will be on site with their teachers during this day. Okay, so that's schedule 1. Monica?
So, and I wanted to just mention that bottom row for the cohort B and C on Monday. A lot of people were misunderstanding that you would be having your 1/3 of your class in front of you teaching, and then the other students would be online watching you. And we're not having that suggestion. That would be, that'd be way too much. So that is not ready for that. What we're talking about. Yeah, I just wanted to make that clear.
All right, schedule 2. Schedule 2 is probably the closest to what it is for being normal. We have 2 cohorts this time, but the start time and the end time is similar to schedule 1. It's the same as schedule 1. So with this, we have basically on Mondays, we will have cohort A, 1st, 3rd, and 5th period. And then on Tuesday, we'll have cohort B, 1st, 3rd, 5th period. And on Wednesday, it will be flex time or office hours. And then cohort A will take their 2nd, 4th, and 6th period on Thursdays. And then cohort B will take their even days on Fridays. And again, the same thing for what happens in the afternoon. It's either 0 or 7th period, or it could also be some flex time or office hours. And the cohort that is not on site will be doing some asynchronous learning. So that is schedule 2. So I'm gonna stop there for a second to see if there are any clarification questions.
Mr. Ochipinti, did you have your hand raised? Oh, no. Ms. Tata?
Yes. So let's see, for the 2 schedules, I'm thinking of my daughter because she's going to be a junior at Jeff. She has 3 AP classes. and let's say she's in cohort A, let's say it's the schedule 1, then you've got, so you said that, so it'll be 1/3 of the school at school. And so her first period, she won't necessarily be in the same classes with the kids in the 3rd period. So there's going to be mingling, just not as many as if we went to schedule 2.
That was my point about the clarification between a
Right.
bubble cohort. What we're doing is the stable
The
cohort.
stable cohort. So I'm, you know, I just want to be clear on that. And also, boy, when we get to this point in the presentation, I don't know, you guys are going to have to pull off some magic here, because master scaling, my God, I just, when I went through the whole presentation, I thought, my God, how are we going to pull this off? And what we've done already is pretty amazing, just putting this presentation together and gathering all the data and everyone working together. But, you know, we have a lot at stake here for our students and our families, and I'm feeling it, because I'm lucky enough to probably be working from home for, we don't even know, my firm doesn't even know how long we're going to be home, but you know, at least I'll be able to pick her up, but other families won't be able to do that. So, and to Ms. Salahuddin's point, you know, kids, when they see each other, they're hugging. They can't help it. They can't help it. So, and we got no control over that, except on campus to some point. Anyway, but that's just that is just the clarification I wanted.
So as far as the master schedule, there are some districts that, you know, are doing something like this very similar. And, you know, we've of course reached out to Synergy and EduPoint, because, you know, if we were to do this, we need to do our magic now, because there's going to be a lot of, you know, grouping students and trying to figure this out. But I know that Mr. Kirkava had already reached out to a master schedule consultant to see how this would work if we were to do this. And, you know, it is possible, but there's, you know, lots of script writing that needs to happen.
The other thing is we have families with more than one child in a high school. And so making sure that they're in the same cohort, whichever option is selected, is going to be important. And that's going to be a scheduling issue, right? Because you may have an older child who's in AP classes that are offered at completely different times from what a freshman or sophomore might be taking. So you're right, the master schedule is going to be challenging, but I think our staff is up to it. It won't be without some pains, but we'll get there.
And so this is the schedule, whether we start at home or start. Okay, so there won't have to be too much juggling of the master schedule. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Great.
And also, we just want to send our gratitude to all the principals and vice principals right now for the work on the master schedule. Thank you, guys. Yes. We know it's going to be a challenge.
Okay. Survey results. So again, schedule 1 or schedule 2. Overall, as a district, a combined parent, guardian, staff results. Schedule 2 is the preference, because again, it is the, you know, the closest to normalcy. And this is what, you know, they've been saying, and they really want students to be on site. As far as breaking it down by the stakeholders, so here's parent, guardian, and student. And so as you can see, schedule 1 is the yellow, schedule 2 is the blue. For parents and students, they would prefer schedule 2, but our staff, not by a lot of, you know, margin, would prefer schedule 1.
I just want to say that if you go back again, and I mentioned this last time, that you know, sometimes we have to think that schedule 2 is what we're used to and what we're comfortable with. And that does not necessarily make it the right thing to do or make it better. It's just what we're comfortable with. So a lot of times I think people look at that and they say, this is what we're doing because this is what I've done. So that makes it comfortable. So this is why I want to do it. So just, I want us to think about that also. Talking to a lot of the presidents up and down the coast in California, some people are making some different decisions based on things that we've never done before. This whole thing is something we've never done before, but, trying to disrupt some of these systems that we've had in place. So I always have to throw that in there.
Thank you, Ms. Casey. Okay, so this is now broken down by school and by student. So if you look at this, again, Schedule 2 is very popular for students, but like what Ms. Casey is saying, that, we revert back to something that is familiar, that is closest to the normal, especially given during, this really stressful time. So, our students prefer Schedule 2. This is by school site, parent and guardian responses. And again, all of the school sites would prefer Schedule 2 over Schedule 1. Now, this is what was interesting, is that when we ask our staff at each of the school site, as you can see at Jefferson High School, 73% of the staff chose Schedule 1. At Oceana, it's 70-30, Terra Nova 57-43, Thornton 2, prefers Schedule 1. So we'll talk about Thornton a little bit because they will have, their own schedule. But, Westmore High School, it's a little more close, 51-49%. But, the percentage of staff members choosing Schedule 1 was a little surprising, honestly, when I looked at this first. But it's, almost a little refreshing, because I know that they had a lot of conversation about the pros and the cons of having a schedule that is different from what's traditional. So the other thing that we looked into is, student and parent comments. I won't read all of this, but if you look at the comments, it is a continuum of responses. The ones that are, I am not sending my kid to school at all, or I want 100% normal, as if COVID never happened. So it is, one comment will be on this side, one comment on this side, and it just goes back and forth. And the other comments is, again, about IEP. How do we serve our students with IEP? And then just questions about masks and how to, do we make sure that we have our students wearing masks? So that's the student parent comments. So based on that, here are some of our findings. This is, again, the participation rate. Parents about 25%, students 16%, staff 62% district-wide. So district-wide, approximately 60% of students, parents, staff prefer Schedule 2. That means students are on campus twice a week and attending all 6 classes. Why? Because it is the closest to a regular schedule, providing much needed sense of normalcy. And that students, it will be better for the mental health of our students because they will be with their peers. Parents and students prefer Schedule 2, but staff prefer Schedule 1 by a close margin. Students at all sites prefer Schedule 2. Parents at all school sites prefer Schedule 2. Staff prefer Schedule 2, except at Jefferson and Thornton High School. So here is our recommendation. So again, we will be discussing that many steps on, if we were to start with at-home learning, who do we phase in and bring on campus first? And our recommendation is to offer Schedule 2 at Oceana, Terra Nova, and Westmore. And again, whatever that schedule is, the Schedule 2, it will be the same as if we were going to be at home or virtual learning. However, what we would like to see is a pilot of Schedule 1 at Jefferson High School for the whole fall semester. And if we were to go to at-home learning, the schedule will be the same. And there will be separate schedules for Thornton High School, adult transition, TDS, and independent studies. So we'll work through that. And another proposal is for the staff to return on August 6th to start preparing, but the students' first day of instruction does not happen until August 17th. Before I ask for clarification questions or a discussion, these are some of the reasons why we had recommended for Jefferson High School to pilot Schedule 1. So Jefferson High School staff overwhelmingly voted for Schedule 1. This limits the number of students on campus to a third of the student body. So next year, there is a projection of 1,415 students. And as you know, Jefferson High School is such a small, compact campus, and that there is a high COVID case in Daly City. So having, just even half of the students, half of that is 700 students, that is a lot of students. The projection for Terra Nova is about 800 or so. So if they cut theirs in half, they'll have about 400. Oceana will have about 300. Westmore, the projection is about 1,400. So theirs will, be about 700 as well. But again, Jefferson High School staff wanted to try this out. Also, we wanted to see, how do we veer away from the traditional schedule of 6 periods a day in a semester, and try something different to see if it would work for our students. And here's an actual comment from one of our staff members. It allows some leeway for teachers as they only need to focus on 3 classes at a time. This would give them more time to be able to organize themselves with their teaching and their assignments, as juggling in school and at home learning is a challenge. The smaller groups of students allow the teacher to focus on individuals more and allows students who need more help to reach out to their teachers easily. So before I continue, I actually want to call on Ms. Emmendorfer to speak on behalf of Jefferson High School, because we had discussed this pilot with her.
Sure. So, we've all know how this has impacted our students, our families, our communities in ways that we can't even imagine. But even in that, our staff has been creative, innovative in ways that, with very few resources, very little time to prepare. And I say that because when you think about it, they're like master degree programs for instructional technology. People take 18 to 24 months to master what our teachers did in weeks. And that speaks to their capacity. It speaks to their compassion. And that speaks to their willingness to do whatever it takes to serve our most underserved students. And so, I'm not exactly sure why our parents and students selected option 2, but I can tell you that, like you said before, our staff knows our students and they know our campus. And so to say, as mentioned, to have 700 students on campus at any given time is going to be difficult for us at Jeff to ensure that students are physically distancing just because of the size of our campus. Our students asked for help. They asked for additional study time, and option 1 provides for that. They also mentioned that it was extremely difficult for them to focus on 6 classes at a time. This gives them an opportunity to focus. This gives our teachers are already starting, regardless of what option we choose, our teachers have already decided hey, we need to know what students need to know and what would we like them to know. We're focusing on what we need them to know in order for them to move to the next level. And so they can do that in a quarter system. But at the end of the day, I can't lose sight of this because it keeps coming back to me. It's 21st century learners that we're talking about, taught by 20th century teachers, 19th century curriculum in an 18th century calendar bell schedule. It's time for us to try to do something different. It really is. And I fully support and trust that our staff can do it to make sure that they're supporting our most underserved and under-resourced students.
Thank you, Ms. Emmendorfer. One more slide before discussion. So what do we need to do to make sure that what we're doing is effective? So one of the guiding principles, again, is that we have some metrics and checkpoints in evaluation. So we would like to do is, to provide the Board of Trustees in a weekly recap on an update on how things are going at each of the school site. Use the metrics below to evaluate effectiveness. Again, the San Mateo COVID data, cases and contacts. And we're also looking into monitoring Google Classroom usage and drop-ins during synchronous meetings through Google Meet or Zoom. Our student participation, we will also survey students, parents, staff, guardians every 4 weeks, and then link on the website for stakeholders to provide feedback, suggestions, and concerns. So with that, I want to open it up for discussion. Let's stop my screen.
So I just want to kick it off by saying, Ms. Emmendorfer, preach. That was almost a religious experience. I was like, yes. And the choir says, amen. Okay, I'll open it back up to everyone else. Mr. Ochapinti?
Right on. A lot of good ideas. I think it's interesting that, our district, like Ms. Casey was saying, a lot of us would like to go back to what's comfortable. A sense of normalcy can be deceiving, right? Because we know that even in recent weeks, right, that's kind of thrown us back into a sense of abnormalcy, or whatever you want to call it. So the Schedule 1, doing that at Jefferson, I think, is a really good example. Jeff is probably, I know with just small learning communities in general, in my experience as a teacher, and seeing that in different schools over years, students adapt to things differently. And so I would be interested to see if this discussion might create some kind of different feedback between now and August with the other schools. Just looking at the numbers, like if you're talking about 700 students on campus at the same time, you're talking about half the campus versus 1/3. By public health, considerations alone, I would be open to thinking that we should promote Schedule 1 and maybe have a deeper discussion what that means. Like President Salahuddin was saying, it opens up your mind to the possibility that, what we've been doing isn't what we should be always doing anyways. And so as we're looking at different things and just, adapting, I think on a health level, our campuses are going to feel different regardless. Just seeing half of your peers instead of 1/3 is going to be a big change. And like we said, our students are going to see each other outside of school on their own terms for what it's worth. And although I'm inclined to want to see more people too, I do think that we should promote that more based off of that. I do have one question. For the staff obviously is very concerned because they're essential workers, and our students will be essential students. They're on campus every day, or not every day, but I mean often enough. And if they come on Wednesdays, then they will be there another day with different people from different cohorts too. So we know we can't control all these things, but I was wondering, what was the primary concern for opting for Schedule 1? Was it because of like the points we're bringing up right now? Was that a discussion that was happening among staff? Because I think it's very relevant. Or was it more just towards, the feasibility of it, or other reasons?
So the concern of some staff is because there is you take the first 3 periods during the first half. If they're taking an AP class during the first half, that it may be a little difficult to pick it up, for the spring semester. That has been, the just advanced placement has come up several times in the discussion as far as the concern, and just having that gap of not learning, stopping for about 9 weeks or so and then picking it up the second semester was a concern.
So let me insert a couple other things to really make you think in pain, because I think there are benefits and drawbacks to either of these schedules. The elementary districts are watching what we're doing very carefully. They would like to sync with us as much as possible, and they won't be able to sync on that second option. They can sync in a like an AABB model or an ABAB model, but to do something quarter system wise, that's not going to work for elementary districts for obvious reasons. The other thing I want you to be thinking about is in the quarter system, the students are meeting physically with their teachers 5 hours a week. And when they're meeting in the other option, it's twice the amount of time with the teacher. So just things to be thinking. I really think it's going to come down to whatever option we decide on, it's what the teachers do with it and how well we prepare them to teach in that schedule.
Mr. Lee?
Yeah, once again, I appreciate what Ms. Emmendorfer shared, because I was pretty excited when I saw option one, once I actually understood what it meant and to see the overwhelming support that that the Jefferson staff had for that particular schedule. And, when I look at the numbers, it's nearly a 50-50 split at Westmore. So it's not like it's an overwhelming support of Schedule 2 either. So clearly we have, and even you look at TN, 57 to 43%, and it's only a difference of 7 staff. We're not talking significant numbers here. So I appreciate the creativity and the willingness to go deeper. And what excites me about option one is the fact that you're going to go really deep into each of those 3 courses. And I'm excited about what we could do, especially with that community of students. We already know the stories behind all of that, so I'm really excited about what we could do with this. So I can't wait to see what you guys do, because I think that's going to be phenomenal.
Ms. Christensen?
Hey guys, I got the opportunity. First of all, I think what Keisha said was amazing. I think, we're all kind of ready for a change in education. But my portion of the presentation is student support and looking at things through the eyes of the student. And I had several students in my group, and I had several conversations with students on campus. And I heard a lot of concerns, and I just wanted to throw out there that a lot of their worry with number 2, yes, is the AP. They're really worried that, great, we're ready for a system change, but is the system outside of outside of us ready to change? Because, even for us as a school, parents, when they're choosing a school, they ask us about our AP scores. They ask us, how we came to that number and how our kids did compared to the other schools and in other cities and private schools and whatnot. A lot of the kids were really concerned with that. The SPED kids, some of them were really concerned with the fact, like, what if I get math and English in the first 9 weeks and I suck at both of those, and those are my 2 hardest classes, and I'm only going to be doing my hardest work in those 9 weeks? Or what if I have PE and art the first 9 weeks? Then the second 9 weeks is going to be really, really hard for me. So they were concerned with that. But I agree. I'd love to see the change, and I'd love to rock the boat. I'm all about it always. But I think the kids, they're gravitating, like you said, towards what their normal is. They miss everybody, especially on our campus, and I know a lot of the other campuses. We just started this SPED push-in model, and those kids are really concerned with being stuck in their science, math, and English courses for 9 weeks straight without anything to balance it, or to have a study skills or tutorial class every single day to support them in that. So I just wanted to throw it out there.
Thank you, Mrs. Casey.
I also wanted to mention that we need to, we often bring up the AP issue. That's one of the first things that I hear, which kind of hurts me a little, because we need to start thinking about the EL students, the people that just came, the special education students, those that are in the most need of the services that we have to offer. And I'm not saying that the AP students are not in that need, but we have students that are in real dire need, and we need to think about them. And so when we've talked about these schedules, we've talked about maybe, you know, a lot of the EL classes, they have 2 classes. So making sure that they have one of them, 9 weeks, and the other one, the second 9 weeks, so that they have some continuity. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. And I think that our staff can be really creative as far as keeping in contact with students during the time that they're not there. We can probably figure something out outside of the model if students are really concerned about those things. But again, if we're always bringing up those AP students right away, and I want us to really think about the EL students and the students with IEPs or the 504 students as well. First thing, that's all.
Mr. Medvedev?
Thank you so much. Well, I really appreciate what both Michaela and Monica just said, because that was sort of what I wanted to bring up. And, you know, as Mr. Loria said, both schedules definitely present advantages and disadvantages. And I also really appreciate what Keisha said. I think Schedule 2 is, or Schedule 1 rather, is very exciting. But yes, as Monica mentioned, the special education departments would be impacted by the schedule decision, and we'll have to consider how to work within those schedules to provide services to students. One of the implications of Schedule 2, or Schedule 1, sorry, that I think we'll have to work through is if we have students only going to a couple of classes and then we move to an at-home learning portion, or at-home learning only, and they haven't yet met the teacher or gotten accustomed to the routines of the class, it's difficult to learn those things at a distance, whereas having some in-person time to build rapport with the teacher could be helpful to those students. But at the same time, having only 2 classes at a time could allow those students to balance their assignments more easily. So again, advantages and disadvantages, but thank you, Monica and Michaela, for bringing up students who have who receive special education services.
Thank you. And I just want to say, like, when I saw the 2 different schedules, my first thought was just to the equity and to make sure that whichever schedule is being used, that it's equitable for all students. Like, so if we are running with 2 different schedules in the district, and it kind of sets off alarms for me when our school, that has the highest number of students that are free and reduced lunch English language learners, doing a different pathway from everyone else, just to make sure that education is as equitable as all the other education that we're offering in the other schools. So that was my only key concern. I will say that, you know, I was excited by Jefferson that they are, and that the teachers are excited about moving forward with this. In the middle of a pandemic, I would be less inclined to have everybody do something that they weren't overwhelmingly in support of. That's a drastic change. So I'm okay with having the 2 different schedules, so we can meet our staff where they're at, just like we want to meet the students where they're at, and that it's a pilot. And if it's successful, once we're through this, look at expanding it out. But right now, unless, I'm just more inclined to listen to the feedback of our teachers and staff about what they want to do. And if it's not an overwhelming yes, then I would prefer to just stick closer to what they're comfortable with before diving into something that maybe they're less comfortable with. Mr. Hada?
I fully agree with you. And also, as a parent of an AP student, she'll adapt. I mean, she has to. And I think a lot of these, a lot of them, they turn to each other anyway. Like during AHL, they were turning to each other and for homework help, whatnot. So, and we have to be fully equitable. I mean, especially now. And I worry about the teachers, what they're taking on. And also I was curious, Ms. Casey, if, do we have like a percentage of the teachers who don't feel comfortable coming back to school? If they don't want to come back to school to teach?
I don't have a number that's a hard number,
Right.
but about 30% said I would prefer to do all distant learning. And some of those people are probably going to really need to, but not all of them. Right. Some of them, it's a preference. We haven't done the survey saying, can you come back? Right. So that will be something that will have to happen. I think that there's going to be a portion of students that are not going to be able to be on any campus. And then there's going to be a portion of adults that are going to not be able to be on campus health-wise. Right. So we're going to get there, but we're not at that point yet. That's kind of later.
Okay, thank you.
All right, unless there's any comments. Oh, Mrs. Garrett.
Thank you. Well, I don't really have too many things to say. I definitely want to support every single speaker that has spoken about the schedule, and I definitely agree with President Salahuddin that I don't think that there is every square hole has the same peg, right? So we need to definitely meet all students where they're at, because that is definitely, what our focus is, in equity. And I just want to make a side comment about Ms. Emmendorf's comment. I was, if I was sitting there and she's telling me something, I definitely would have signed up already. If you had said that at the beginning of the presentation, we didn't even have to go through all that other stuff, because I would have been like, where is it at? And where do I sign up? Like right here and right now. So, so thank you for the passion. I mean, there was no question about any comment that you made, because you kind of hit everything on the spot. I mean, just, about the under-resourced, underfunded, underprivileged, I'm just like, okay, yes, I'm right there with you. So thank you for that. And I do feel that you guys are definitely ready to, get things going. And I really applaud that, to really disrupt the chain, of the normacy of everything. So thank you so much. I really appreciated that.
Thank
and
you.
I agreed to that.
Thank you. It's really about the staff. We're ready, and we're ready. And we know that there are flaws in every system. There are kinks in everything, but we'll figure that out and we'll adapt very quickly, as we've already proven that we can do.
Awesome, thank you. All right, anything else? All right, moving forward.
All right. Next part of the presentation is several of our staff members and students will be talking about what they've been working on as far as how we will do school in these different areas. So we will start actually with Dr. Deloria with the workplace conditions.
Thank you. So a number of the people in this subcommittee are actually on vacation. So I will be presenting for Marcus, Stephanie, and other people who couldn't be here tonight. And I want to start out by saying that The standard of care for our workplace conditions is based on federal, county, and state regulations and health orders. So these aren't decisions that were wishy-washy. They came from some kind of a document that says either this is what you shall do or this is what's recommended. I think one of the biggest concerns from parents and staff that I heard in the webinars is what are we going to do about the ventilation? And that's understandable. So, you know, our district office is older, some of our schools are older. And so I wanted to address this head on. First of all of our dampers in all of our facilities have been open to allow the maximum amount of ventilation. We are going to be encouraging everybody whenever you have windows and doors to prop them open. And this is going to be kind of a change in practice because, as you know, many of our teachers keep their doors locked. So helping them understand how they can still be safe during an emergency and yet keep the door open is going to be really important. The other thing is all of our HVAC system have air filters, and what we've used in the past is something called a MERV 10. So if you go to an adult function this weekend, you can talk about MERV filters. And what we did is we've replaced all of our MERV 10 with medical grade filters, which is a MERV 13. And what that means is it really does filter out the very, very tiny molecules that that carry bacteria and viruses. So that's already been done. In terms of the restrooms, keep in mind as I say this, that for the most part, students are only going to be in school until lunchtime, right? Unless they have a 0 period or a 7 period. So the standard of care is that the day crew will be sanitizing the restrooms 3 times during the school or work day. And then in the evening, the night crew will perform a final cleaning each evening. A schedule is already posted to indicate when a classroom was serviced. That was something that our student advisory had requested. And the supplies will be checked more frequently. In terms of our offices, our staff custom built plexiglass shields to be installed on the desks or counters where any of our staff are more likely to engage with others, either from the school or from the community. And I've already seen them in the district office, but they're expected to all be in place by Friday. Disinfectant wipes will be provided in the office areas. And Marcus has been working with his leads to tape off the areas for the correct amount of physical distancing. That's not only around people's desks to indicate what 6 feet away is, but it's also for some common areas. So imagine the copy machines at some of the sites. So marking off some of that. In the classrooms, a teacher's area is going to be taped out on the floor to support physical distancing. This can't really be done until the teachers come back because we want to give the teachers the choice on where they want to put that. And while teachers are allowed to remove their masks while talking, many may not want this option. And so Jake has been researching microphones that teachers can wear. And so even though they're wearing their mask, students can still hear what the teacher's talking about. All of the classrooms, actually all the classrooms already have disinfectant dispensers. Staff has been checking to make sure they all operate. Some of the classrooms also have soap dispensers. So especially in those CTE classrooms such as art, etc., they have both. And additional furniture and stuff will have to move to storage. So I don't know if we're going to get to it tonight, but we're talking about delaying bringing our students back to school if we start in that model to give teachers more time to get their classrooms prepared. Because if they're going to have fewer students in their classrooms and they have to be physically distanced, they're going to have furniture removed. And we're going to need to have some help with that, get that stuff stored, and then let the teachers have time to set up their classrooms. And the student, oops, I don't know what that last one was. All right, student furniture will be arranged to support the 6-foot physical distancing. Thank you. Next slide, please. So some other considerations, hand sanitizer or soap will be widely available everywhere. Masks have been ordered for those staff or students who don't have them. And then you know that we've made well over 600 masks for our staff. And we have a community sewing group going on right now. And we already have commitments for more than 500 reusable masks for our students who don't have them. I do expect that many staff and students will have them though. Major hallways and large spaces will have to be marked to indicate direction. So we have some kind of order, especially during the transition from one period to another. The CDC says that the virus is spread mostly through moisture droplets. If you remember early on in March, there was something that came out that said that the virus lasted for days on steel and metal and something about fabric. But it turns out that the virus doesn't last very long on surfaces. We have to be more concerned about the moisture droplets. So frequent disinfection using EPA approved products of surfaces and objects will actually greatly reduce any kinds of threats. We do plan to inform staff, students, and families of any of the chemicals that we use besides soap, although a lot of places are saying just using routine bleach is going to be sufficient to do some of this work. But in the webinars, that was a question that came from both parents, caregivers, and staff, is they would like to know what the chemicals are. So once we know what those are, we'll communicate that out. Now, here's the important part. This isn't something that we can direct at the district office. Marcus is going to give guidance, has already given guidance. We need principals to develop operation plans for their schools, because each school is different, different size classrooms, different number of offices, things like that. So the principals will have to work with their crews to develop safe plans for some of these the common student areas, like the library, for example. There may be we are researching additional hand washing stations that we might be able to put around the campus. Other things we're looking at are touchless water fountains and touchless paper dispensers. But in a time when the resources aren't flowing from Sacramento, I don't know how much of this we'll be able to accomplish. And then we actually are doing a study on how much, whether we have any issues with warm or hot water. I think one of the problems we have first thing in the beginning of the day is when the water hasn't been used, the pipes from the street are just, it's all cold water. But anyway, Marcus is going to explore this. So I guess that's it. Did we want to stop to get any clarifying questions?
Are there any clarifying questions?
Oh, come on. I couldn't have explained it that well.
No, just, okay, so I'll go. My concern here is departure and arrival. And so what that's going to look like, especially having that many kids, are they going to come straight into campus? Where are they going to go? How is the temperature check going to work?
So I didn't talk about any of the protocols for students. That's coming up. But that's going to be at the admin retreat at the end of July. We're going to spend a big portion of those 2 days on what has to be in an operations plan. And I think there's a slide coming up that talks about all of the routines that we have to train students on. And one of the things every principal and even the district office is going to have to consider is how are we going to handle drop off and pickup? How are we going to handle, if we're going to have a brunch, how are we going to handle brunch? How are we going to handle, so there's a lot of those things in there coming up.
And the other question is masks. And so, you know, I have not worn a mask for more than 2 to 3 hours at a time. And when you do wear it for an extended period of time, it gets really wet. I mean, from the evaporation and stuff, or from your breathing. And so there's still studies to look at whether a wet mask is still effective. And so, you know, is there, and I don't know if there's anywhere we can get guidance about, should you change your mask out during the day, bring extra masks, things like that?
So the first thing I would say to that is to remind everybody, when we wear a mask, it's not to protect ourselves, it's to protect everyone around us. So it's to keep your own personal moisture droplets to yourself. I have not heard anything about recycling them. Maybe Ms. Boswino has heard something. What I have heard is guidance down in the elementary school that, you know, how long you can expect a kindergartner or first grader to wear one. And it's really by fourth grade, the expectation is that the students are wearing it except for when they're eating and drinking.
Yeah, I know that the mask and it's keeping it, you know, but if it's a mask is wet, it kind of is less effective in keeping your moisture to yourself because it's easier to, you know, things are easier to pass through a wet mask. And the longer you have it on during the day, it just gets really wet, especially the cloth homemade mask. Like if you have an, I've seen the masks that have the extra cover that has that where you can put the filter in, those homemade masks where you can place a filter, they tend to stay a lot drier than just the homemade masks that don't have the filter option. So it's just taking and the problem is there's not a lot of guidance on this about masks and how long they're effective. So,
let me do some research on that. No one has ever brought that up in my superintendent's group. So let me do some research on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then I know there was a question on PPE and us having the PPE. And you know, that's another issue that I'm working on a county with. But I think that's another item that needs to be checked before we open, because there's a lot of pressure on us to open, but you know, I'm over the unfunded mandates, you know, so if they're not gonna, you know, we're saying if there's supplies, if there isn't supplies for us to have the appropriate amount of soap and stuff around the school, then I don't feel comfortable opening. And you can't pressure us into doing something and then say, figure it out, you know, all of the independent, the things that the states were complaining about the federal government doing, the state is now doing to us as individual districts, like figure out how to get your own soap and water and competing with all the other districts to get it. So I'm hoping that the county will step in and be a resource for us to get the supplies, but you know, I don't want to open and then the supplies and soap and different things start to run out as this new you know, because if one school opens, most school will be open. And now that's another added level of organization, of, you know, all fighting for the same amount or the similar products. So
you're right. And although the governor has promised to send supplies to the school districts, I don't know if that's going directly to a district, if it's going to the county for being pushed out. But when you think about the classroom protocol is going to be that when students walk in, they disinfect their hands, and on their way out, they disinfect their hands. So think of how much disinfectant. So your point is well taken. And I've made a note to myself to check with maintenance and operations to see how much of a stockpile they have, how long they think that will last.
that's all I have. I don't know if anyone else has anything.
Good questions.
All right, turning back. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Can you guys use the raise hand, because there's a delay for me in the feed.
Oh, okay.
The raise hand feature on the side,
Okay.
it's easier. Mr. Ochoa.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the feature's on one, but thank you. Just a quick question. In terms of taping off desks and having a teacher area, in special education, I know not all of our schools or most of our schools do this, but with co-teaching or with instructional aides, I mean, and that's a question to work out with master scheduling, I'm sure, and other things, but I think given the opportunity and looking at the flexibility of our schedules, it might be worth looking into. I think it is worth looking into in terms of how we navigate what opportunities could be done with co-teaching and how that might be even better in terms of consistency with our cohorts.
So I'd like to respond to that. One of the things we're thinking of is how to do a better job of facilitating our students when they're at home doing their distance learning. How can we use our staff who isn't teaching to facilitate our students who need the help? There was some really good research that came out about this, that many of our students don't know how to organize and manage that distance learning piece. So that's one thing. And when it comes to taping off classrooms, whether there's 1 adult, 2 adults, 4 adults in the classroom, that's why some of this has to wait until the teachers return, because we're not going to make those decisions. We need teachers to, and they can't, they're not going to come in during the summer. We need them to come in after they're rested, have them sort out what they don't need, what they do need. And that's going to take some time. And I think the schedule that Monica, Karina, and I came up with is going to give teachers the time that they need to get organized properly in their classroom.
Thank you. Mr. Hada.
I just make a comment on what you said about the homemade masks that you can put a filter in. So I tried that with, they say you can use a coffee filter. It's really hard to breathe in that. And I used it going to the store, and it's really hard to breathe in it. And I just can't imagine our students wanting to do that. And then as far as the logistics, we've got a team already installing plexiglass, and those should be up by Friday, which is awesome. And then the taping off of offices, common areas, that we can do, but with we've got to wait for the teachers to get back to handle their classrooms. But if we're going to approve a return to school plan on July 6th, but then but then you've got the admin retreat, which you said is at the end of the month, where there's a lot that's going to be discussed. And then the site operations plans are due July 31st. So there's not much. Are you making these site plans at the admin retreat?
Yeah, we're giving them a large chunk of time to create them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they need time.
Because then you've got between July 31st and the teachers return to school August 6th. That's 6 days. That's not much time.
So I don't think we've shared this yet. And Monica, is it okay for me to share our thoughts about what we want to do with that first week of school?
I think it's okay to share it. I just am concerned that some of the AB, I can't think of the name of it. It's not AB 77 anymore, but there's some things we need to think about and work on. But yeah, go ahead, share it. Just the thoughts.
Yeah, so we've been promised that the state's going to take action to give us leniency with our number of instructional days and our daily instructional minutes. All superintendents have requested that. So it's just taking a while for them to get all these decisions made, and we'll keep pushing on this. So the way the school year works is that that the teachers are back. Convocation would be on the 6th, and we have the 6th and the 7th without students, and then the students are supposed to come the following Monday. We're recommending that students don't start until August 17th, which would give teachers part of that Thursday and Friday to get ready, but then the whole next week, not only to get their classrooms ready, but to they're going to need some training too on what the protocols are, not only for staff, but for the students, to do some initial planning. And we think that gives teachers really 6 days. And we think that'll be a big help. And then we're also thinking that the principals might even want to think about having some kind of a process for students to come onto campus that week to pick up textbooks and some other kinds of things.
I also want to point out that our principals are already thinking. They see this plan and they've already meeting with small groups of their teachers, their leadership team, and planning on how this is going to be implemented. So, they are in the planning process.
So thank you. Okay, turning it back over.
Okay. So now I would like to call on Dr. Robinson and Ms. Ashford to talk about curriculum and instruction.
All right. Good evening, Board of Trustees, Executive Cabinet, and all. So first, just a little bit, we were one of the largest groups with the most focus areas to go through. So I first want to shout out Leigh Anderson, Marlene Gutierrez, Graham Cruikshanks, Joel Bruxford, Kristen Ashford, Lisa Rubin, David Gold, Kristen, help me out. Am I forgetting anybody? But of course, Irene and Natalie are student participants.
Rebecca, Joel.
I got Joel. Did I get Rebecca? Rebecca Ernholt. And they were a wonderful team who not only worked above and beyond the time that we were provided in the return to school. We met a couple of times afterwards, but also Joel reached out to teachers with CTE, Marlene reached out to science teacher, and Kirk Sands, thank you. And Joel reached out to CTE teachers, and Graham reached out to all the visual and performing arts teachers to get feedback on that. So this was, you know, a big group that also sought a lot of input. And of course we had our students. Natalie was actually supposed to help us present this today, but she sent an email that her internet was kind of spotty. So I noticed she had kind of dropped off the call, but it was great to have students, even when we broke into the subgroups, because we kind of split the work at a certain point. Not only were they, as they got kind of comfortable, they were in a pretty intimidating room full of very, opinionated teachers. But it was great to have them give their suggestions and also to have somebody to go to and say, what do you think from the student perspective as we discuss certain areas? Just a really quick overview of how we kind of broke it down. We had a lot of different areas to look at, and so we decided to split it into recommendations and resources. And so, teachers are professionals and should be afforded autonomy in their work, which is why we framed this as recommendations for a lot of our areas. But we didn't want to just have kind of a list of things for teachers to consider without also providing examples of what some of these things would look like. So this is just one example of many that we created for what at-home learning asynchronous lesson design and structures could look like. Some of our rules of thumb for working on our recommendations were to try and limit our suggestions to 4 and 5. We have a lot of areas and teachers are going to be bombarded and inundated with a lot of information and various recommendations and resources. So keeping it succinct as possible was really important to us. Is there anything else you would want to add, Ms. Ashford?
Nope, it's great.
Okay, so this is just an example of how we kind of organized our work. So next slide. So these were all of our various areas that we broke down and, we're focusing on. Each one of these is hyperlinked in there so you can see the full detailed report that looks similar to the one you saw in a previous slide. But I just want to kind of mention some brief call outs from each of the areas. So whatever structure we're in, asynchronous lesson design is going to be really important. We heard a lot of feedback about consistent timing and formatting for independent work. Also getting a sense of how long it takes students to complete those assignments and having teachers have kind of a greater awareness around that. Not only was that something that came up with the students in our group, but you saw it in the information that Ms. Baca shared from the student survey. In addition, we had some considerations for synchronous lesson design. So that's when teachers are utilizing Zoom sessions. And one of the things that came up and was emphasized by a lot of our members was the need to really utilize that time for student collaboration, that might be a little bit more challenging when they're in person because of social distancing. And Zoom has great features like breakout rooms to be able to facilitate that. Also, if we are in person, our schedules all dictate block lesson design. So we talked about how, Oceana is familiar with that. Teachers who at Jefferson who are around during the small learning communities experience block lesson design. But on the whole, that's a new kind of structure for designing classroom instruction for our teachers. So we talked about the need to kind of address chunking instruction, embedding different kind of modalities of instruction, embedding movement. For curriculum and assessment, we really talked about the need more than ever to have really clear learning goals. I know Ms. Ashford in her work with the math teachers for scope and sequence, and Ms. Rubin in the work with the English teachers, we've kind of started to take some of those essential skills that we teach in our courses and break them into need to know and nice to know. And nice to know would be going into extension work. So really making sure that those learning goals are clear and that we're aligning them to low stakes formative assessment and really kind of reimagining what assessment means in this new paradigm. It was really great to talk about intervention periods and supports with, discussing how great flex time has been at Jefferson. And I know Tien's excited to implement that as well. And then we had a discussion too about possibly looking at it, exploring mentorship at the school sites with students being able to assist one another during those office hours and flex time periods. A big part of the discussion surrounded around teaching platforms and tech tools. And really our overall recommendation for this was that we really needed to simplify and prioritize tools. One of the feedback that we got from some students is they kind of felt overwhelmed with, you know, all the new technology tools and platforms that were suddenly opened up to teachers and students during the spring, and that we really want to prioritize those that integrate with Google Classroom, since that is a platform that we're actually recommending all teachers, that we would highly recommend it to go into the MOU, should be utilizing. Marlene did work with the science teachers to develop, you know, talk about the need to develop the safety protocols and utilizing virtual labs. Graham did a lot of work working with the visual and performing arts teachers on some of the supply kits that they can give students to take home, prioritizing kind of using solo performance and peer reviews. And then Joel had emailed me the recommendations from the CTE teachers, so I will have that added in later on Monday. He just took a little extra time so he could make sure he got feedback from other CTE teachers, because though they are a similar department, they all do such different things. So we wanted to make sure he reached out to others. So with this, we were able to take all of these different areas of focus to then decide, all right, the main recommendation from all of these things is that there's a lot of learning to do. And so the next slide will be on PD. But before I jump into this, Kristen, anything that I missed or that you think we should highlight?
Not from what you've said so far. I think this really, this is the only slide I was going to make a comment on. That, as you can see, there are so many recommendations and desires for professional learning, but I know that the instructional coaches and staff have already started brainstorming and thinking about how they can share their expertise. So I do know that that a lot of people, we have a lot of expertise in our district already on some of these things.
Yes, it's important to note that when we were discussing this, one of the kind of ground rules for the professional learning recommendation is that we were not recommending the form that the professional learning took place in. Like, we weren't saying all district webinars or screencasts or, you know, what have you. And this is also not a recommendation that every single staff member needs to go through a training this August in all of these topics, because that makes me want to cry just looking at it and trying to figure that out. And we are not trying to bombard and overwhelm the staff. But that being said, we kind of started out with this work in a tiered system where we were talking about, okay, what's high priority and need to know, what's maybe more nice to know, and what's more good to know. And it was just really hard. A lot of this stuff is really foundational to doing this work. As Ms. Semmendorfer mentioned before, you know, people get masters in this. And now all of a sudden we have this really short amount of time to kind of familiarize ourselves. But this is a really great starting place for us to have the conversation of how are we going to utilize our instructional coaches? How are we going to utilize some of our teachers with the expertise at their various sites and get them collaborating with their colleagues that they're already working on to kind of explore some of these topics. When I did offer some professional learning over the spring, I also conducted a survey with the staff, and most staff does feel confident. So I'm hopeful that most of these topics will not be need to knows for a lot of teachers in the upcoming few weeks we have before we get started, but it is at least a list to get us going. So yeah, that's it for us.
Thank you so much. Opening up for questions, comments. Okay, so I do want to thank everybody for the work that was done here. I can't even imagine. It's an insurmountable amount of work reading through all of that and not even getting a full, you know, I know that was just a little tiny piece of what is actually happening around our curriculum and what's being taught. So I'm extremely grateful for the work, and I'm very grateful that we also had students that participated in that process. So thank you.
Okay, next. our Student Support Services. So I'd like to call on Ms. Christensen and Jessica Zhao, which is one of our students.
Hey guys. So before I start our section, I just wanted to throw it out there again that most of what our group did was look through things from the student perspective, also from the parent perspective. I have a 10th grader going into the 10th grade at Terra Nova, as well as students that graduated from there. And I run several student groups, or have run several student groups on campus. So it was really trying to get the pulse of the kids and what they needed in order to feel successful in coming back to school this first semester. And the biggest thing was, of course, safety. The student cohorts came up first and foremost. They think that them, and and our group as well, we had our group kind of flexed throughout because we had different students come in and out and different staff members come in and out. But cohorts of smaller groups with the same kids, you know, much like we talked about already, where they're seeing the same teachers and the same kids all day. But the other thing that they stressed were siblings, and having siblings in the same cohorts for transportation reasons. I know specifically at Terra Nova, transportation is one of the things that was brought up a million times by everybody. Ms. Baca already mentioned it. Splitting into a morning afternoon cohort in Pacifica is almost impossible. Terra Nova is not a walkable school. The majority of our kids do not live in an area where they can just walk down the block. We're surrounded by mountains, and most of our kids take a bus to get into the valley. So making sure that families are all in the same cohorts, and like Dr. D said, hopefully working with the other school districts, the little guys, to make sure that our schedules all jive together. The one thing that came up, another thing that came up pretty consistently for our group was the mental health of the students. Most of the students right now are pretty down, and I think that's reflected in the survey answers and why they want to be back at school and why they want to see each other so bad. A lot of students talked about the counseling services, that they felt that they got support from counselors, but moving into this new semester and this new way of doing school and new way of learning, we need to develop new strategies, be able to support students, not just academically, but in their mental health as well. So we talked about processes to develop for the counseling departments, for them to be able to reach out to students individually, in both in person and virtually. If we do go to, you know, school part-time, to be able to come up with a system so that they're seeing different kids every day, but not overlapping, making sure that everything is scheduled, keeping it very tight so that there's not a lot of cross-contamination if they end up seeing kids in their office, and that kind of stuff. Developing a screener and maybe a tiered approach, much like we do at school already, where, you know, if it's a, you know, my best friend tucked behind my back kind of issue, you know, sometimes we'll get a peer helper, and, you know, that's the tier that it's at. And sometimes it escalates and gets, you know, all the way up to the special services counselors and whoever. But making that the tiered system much more clear so that students understand it and staff understands it as well. A lot of times the counselors get, you know, a crying kid in their chair and in the middle of the class, and they don't know what's going on. And it would be more of a system for those teachers to check in with the counselors before just sending a kid down and having to try to figure it out. Group meetings via Zoom, they offered them. Not a lot of kids took advantage of it this time around. I don't think everybody was comfortable with the way things were going yet. Now the kids are very well versed in Zoom, so that might work out better this coming semester. Create how-to videos to solicit help from students, using peer helpers, maybe doing short videos on, you know, this is what I do when I'm stressed out, or this is how I organize my distance learning so that, you know, it doesn't stress me out, little things like that. Both leadership and peer helpers are going to have much less to do on campus. So we were actually trying to think of ways that we could utilize those student groups on campus to help us support the other students while they're at home. Develop the, best practices for counseling virtually. It's a lot different. So just making sure all those norms are out there again, and that the counselors agree on them, and the kids know and the parents know, that kind of stuff. Then we were talking about student absences. A lot of the students and staff feel a little bit stressed on how much they're actually, how much they're supposed to be paying attention to the actual attendance in the virtual classrooms. They're not, nobody's sure. Nobody's 100% sure. You know, I had teachers emailing me, well, this student hasn't checked in about 4 days. Should I be concerned? Should, you know, and then same with the students, like, oh, my teacher just said I have to turn this in at the end of the week. So does that mean I have to check in every day, or does it just mean I check in when my assignments due? So we need to figure out what is going to be required of us from the county and the state as far as attendance goes, and then come up with a very clear protocol for reporting the attendance and working with the students and the staff. I'm going to let Jessica talk about student orientation. We really feel like these two things are very, very important, especially in this at-home learning framework, especially for our 9th grade students and students who are new to our schools. Most of us would say for the older kids, orientation is not as big a deal, but for these incoming 9th graders who are already terrified to be going to high school, and these parents who are so nervous because this is a whole new world for them, we really feel like these were two things that really needed a lot of attention. So we talked a lot about a lot of different things. So I'll let Jessica take over.
Yeah, so thanks, Ms. Christensen. So when our group started looking at student and parent orientation, we really tried to take into consideration what was the role of orientation at our sites. And we kind of two parts, the physical tour part and the information session. And those are the two things that we decided were the most important about orientation. On the physical orientation part, we as a group concluded that we thought that for students, a physical tour was extremely important. Besides it being a time for new students to tour the campus, which is going to be really important if we end up returning to school in the fall, and it'll be really important just in the future because we should be returning at some point. Besides that, the physical tour is also really important for community building. At different sites, we have Link Crew, we have ASB, these student groups often lead tours and they do bonding, icebreakers, and it's a way for these new students to meet people in the community. So staff members, older students who have been there longer, and they get to meet other new students as well. So the physical tour is actually a time for great community building. And at this time, especially, we need to build a community, which is why we saw great importance in the idea of having a physical tour. So, of course, the way that tours have worked in the past will not work under the same COVID-19 guidelines. So ways that we propose that we could make these tours continue included rotating schedules with groups being in different buildings so that groups would not come in contact with each other, and to have smaller groups, so around 8 to 10 students, and likely 1 to 2 student guides to tour them around. Of course, that might depend on site, and a lot of these things will be dependent on who will be in charge of creating the schedules for these tours during this orientation. Other ideas included staggering start times and potentially having an orientation over multiple days so that groups will be there on campus at different times. Of course, a lot of the logistics will have to be worked out, and something that our group also proposed was we can definitely reach out to student groups. So ASBs, leadership groups, Link Crew, all these groups are available for us to reach out to and ask for help. And these groups know the campus, they've run orientation before, and they can likely help us adapt to whatever the specific things are. Can we get, yeah, thank you. So, and for everything else, for the information part, our group really thought that it could be streamlined. Orientation can definitely become virtual. All the information can, in some ways, with a lot of time and effort, be translated into video form or document form. And those can all be uploaded onto our website. And in fact, a lot of those things will be really helpful in the future. I mean, a lot of these things like having virtual tours, having students carry around cameras on campus and saying, oh, look.
Are you going to bed? April, you are unmuted. You need to mute. There you go. Go ahead. You're good now.
Okay. So a lot of these pre-recorded clips will be really helpful in the future as well. So it's just compiling all the information that orientation has and uploading that on all of our websites. That can be everything from having the virtual tour to, for parents, having parent view, parent-teacher organization information, what discipline is like at each school and academic plans. But also something else that was brought up was in this information, we need to include specific information about how each school and the district is moving forward with COVID-19. And having that information readily available on our website would be extremely helpful for all members of our community, not just parents. And I think a clarification that I'd like to make is we really saw parent orientation as an extension of student orientation, because parents are getting all the information that students are getting, just a little bit more, and a little bit more that's specific to parents, like parent view. And so that's why we tackle them together. And again, I definitely think that it's possible. It's possible to make orientation virtual. And I would definitely recommend that we reach out to student groups, because right now there are a lot of student leaders who typically have events like dances or rallies or other big group events that kind of don't have anything to do right now because they can't. So I think it'd be really great to reach out to students. And some students are really creative too. So they can like make all sorts of videos. So I'll hand it back to Ms. Christensen. Do you have the next part?
All right, thanks, Jess. So you'll hear us say a lot. We really felt like most of this stuff, our main idea behind all these things, guys, was to build some sort of video library, not necessarily reinvent the wheel at each school site, but use leadership. Maybe the Jefferson leadership kids can do hand washing protocol videos and sanitizing videos, and the Terra Nova kids could do this is how you get onto Zoom and how you navigate the online classroom, and having essentially a video library for kids to be able to, and parents to be able to access this information at any time visually. It also, we really want to stress that students are more successful when they feel like they're part of a community, and that's what's lacking right now, is the kids don't feel like they're part of anything. Especially those incoming ninth graders. We've worked really hard at all the campuses to make the ninth graders feel more welcome and involved. And now that this is all happening, we're really worried about them feeling like they're part of something when they come back to school in the fall. With that being said, these all could be training videos, recording teachers doing their syllabus. This would be especially helpful for a lot of the SPED kids who need to see these teachers actually talking about these things and explaining them. We could use leadership kids to help develop those videos with the teachers, training videos on hygiene and health practices, having things available in multiple languages or translated so that all families can access, introducing technology norms and expectations, and really making that a school-wide or district-wide kind of deal. Right now, every teacher has a different idea of what needs to be done in a Zoom classroom. There's some teachers who are super strict and say, you know, your parents shouldn't be interrupting you while we're in Zoom, and you're, you know, that. And some teachers are like, oh, whatever, you know, like let your little sister say hi to the class. So having a guideline specifically, a clearer guideline so that everybody really understands the protocols, and training everybody on all the different platforms that will be used. And like the group before us said, you know, really kind of restricting it and making it so that we're all using kind of the same stuff that works with Google Classroom, because, you know, why complicate things? Orient students to virtual spaces. So each classroom is a virtual space, and teachers should probably take time to orient them to their specific classrooms as well. We also need to develop a system for teachers to be able to hear student concerns, and students to be able to voice their concerns to not just their teachers, but counselors, staff members, admin. You know, a lot of them were saying that they didn't know who to go to during this. You know, some of them were like, oh, my teacher it was way too hard. I didn't want to say anything to the teacher, but I also didn't want to tell on them to the principal. Like, what's the route for me to go if I need help addressing some concerns with online learning? And then virtual office hours. Everybody felt like that was super duper important. On-campus office hours and virtual office hours, because the kids aren't going to be seeing the staff, the teachers, and their counselors so often as usual, having available times for them to be able to have interaction and contact. I think that's it for me, huh? Am I right?
Yes, any clarification or questions?
Thank you. Any questions? No. So again, thank you all. Well done. I think the sense of community and how do we build a community with the ninth graders coming in is important. And how do we do something that was, you know, there's no option where someone's going to go, that was just as amazing as being in school, right? You know, these are all going to be things that are not as well received as being in person. But I think similar to what we did with senior graduation, in that I have heard a lot of feedback from a lot of families that said they really felt like they were made special. Like there was a community that was built from all the parades and all the different accolades that went out to the senior class and having to deal with the difficult situation. So how do we, you know, use the tools that you guys gave and be as creative and as welcoming to the ninth graders as they come in, I think is a definite priority. So thank you so much for highlighting that and putting that on our radar. Very well received. Ms. Tejada.
Really great points. So well thought out. And I love having Jessica giving part of the presentation. And I think that, you know, we've got a new student advisory council that is being installed, and this would be a great thing for them. I totally agree with getting students involved in making some of these videos that we can use in the future as well. Thank you.
All right, moving on.
All right, the next will be programs, and we have 3 presenters, Ms. Rubin, Mr. Bashirs, and Mr. Medvedov. And we will start with our students learning English, Ms. Rubin.
Hi, so when we were considering our students learning English, we really considered them throughout the curriculum and instruction points when we were preparing. So particularly under curriculum and assessment and intervention periods and supports. So our 4 recommendations here are just on top of what is already being recommended by the curriculum and instruction group. And so for students learning English, we feel it's really important that we leverage the use of our parent liaisons to communicate with families. Both Jefferson and Westmore have a parent liaison, and they are instrumental in getting information out to our parents and families. We need to develop health and safety protocols for testing. We know that our students arrive throughout the year, and so having protocols in place that we can quickly, efficiently, and safely test these students so that we can get them started in classes. We need to increase professional learning opportunities for teachers of newcomers. These are particularly our teachers who teach ELD 1, 2, and 3. And lastly, we need to utilize online learning platforms and prioritize office hours and flex time to best meet the needs of our students.
Thank you. We'll have Mr. Bashirs to talk about adult school.
Hello, folks. Greetings to Board President Saladin, to the Board of Trustees, and also to the members of the Executive Cabinet and every other wonderful person who is here. First of all, where it says up there at the beginning, continue at-home learning, that is definitely where we're going, and not just for the first 6 weeks. You know, as you know, our staff and students trend demonstrably older than our students in the rest of the district. So, and initial survey results indicated that the majority of our students and our staff really were not comfortable returning to business as usual. So we're going to continue distance learning through the first semester. And you know, to support the teachers around that, we're in fact starting tomorrow. Thank you, Ms. Kristen Ashford and also Josh Featherston. We're going to be having a PD, a 2-day PD on Google Classroom. We've reached out to Ventures, the Cambridge Press. They're going to be doing another PD on some of the online features of the Ventures curriculum that we use that really haven't been fully explored. We also are going to be doing a PD on Newsella. So we're bringing in a lot of the things that are already being used in the high schools. Some of our big concerns are obviously providing access to technology. We still had probably, you know, about between 10 and 13% of our students that had trouble getting access, and so we're going to be using some of our CAPE funds for that this year. As well as being able to make sure that our staff actually has all of the necessary technology to be able to continue doing this. We do want to focus on doing at-home learning like you're hearing. I mean, there's going to have to be some small group, socially distanced, following the 4 pillars, group work, office hours, tutorials, you know, particularly for our beginning ESL students that really need a lot of that time. You know, as our teachers have pointed out, without that, you know, you don't get to do the sing-alongs, you don't get to have the group conversations, and we want to be able to provide that. Our challenges that we're looking at, we had our classified staff meet to plan how we're going to do registration. And that for us, we're looking at a 2-week plan right now. The first week for ESL, the next week for GED, and then also, you know, making sure that we're able to do all the necessary testing, the CASAS testing that we have to do at the beginning. And that Richard came out and he measured out the GED center. We're determining all the plexiglass dividers that we're going to need. A company reached out to the consortium and they're offering, you know, at $100, for $250, you get 100 of those face shields, which will still allow people to be able to see one another's mouth move, you know. And so we're doing that to be able to get back to GED testing. And then all of us are pitching in who, you know, we're going to have a number of CASAS proctors. I'm doing the training and going to become a CASAS proctor myself, so that we can spread it out, that we don't have as many people concentrated, and we can do more testing over a longer period of time. Those are our plans right now at the adult school. Did we want to move on now, or shall I kick it over to Lee Medvedoff?
Lee will be talking about adult transition and also our students with IEP.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address all of you. I feel that these slides might end up raising more questions than they answer, which is fine. So I'm happy if I can to answer anything. Just to let you all know, I'm a program specialist, one of 2 that serve the district. And we're welcoming a new director of special education soon who will also be involved in making a lot of the decisions around how to support our students who receive special education services. So Adult Transition is the program that serves adult students who receive a certificate of completion rather than a high school diploma. One of the things that Ms. Baca said at the beginning was that so many of these things are interconnected and interdependent. Transportation is one of those things. But transportation impacts the adult transition program and all of the life skills programs throughout the district in significant ways. So because many of our students in our life skills programs receive transportation in their services from the district in their individual education plans, we'll have to look at how to deliver that service. One thing that we've considered for adult transition is to have a staggered start so that vans could do a drop off for the high schools and then do a drop off later for the adult transition program. We'll have to look at what the health guidelines say about how many students can be in a van, or what the guidelines say about using vans at all. And then also we can consider parent reimbursement for transportation. If parents of a student who has that service in their IEP opt to drive their student, then that parent may be able to be reimbursed. And that would be a way that we can safely transport students to the adult transition program and to our life skills programs at Terra Nova and Oceana. And then we also worked on creating a schedule for the adult transition program, which looks similar to Schedule 1 with cohorts of students on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday. We're looking at having our students who have one-to-one support staggered into different cohorts, as well as students who have toileting support needs, so that we're being mindful of how many staff members will be available to work with those students and to be mindful of the number of people in a room at a time. We can go to the next slide. So the adult transition program, a big component of that program is community-based instruction as well as workability. And those are going to be impacted by what's going on with the health measures and all the considerations due to COVID-19. So we're going to have to see what happens, but we'll have to research the allowability and limits, if and how we can use SamTrans, and whether or not students will be able to go to their job sites, and if so, how we're going to transport them there. We're looking at having a shorter day so that we can have grab and go lunches. And then we're also going to utilize our experts in our occupational therapists and speech language pathologists to help us help our teachers to teach students the hygiene expectations, how to use their PPE, et cetera. And as Mr. Luria referenced earlier, one-way hallways at our comprehensive schools will have to mirror that for our adult transition program, which is currently housed at the district office. And then of course, technology and Chromebook assignments are also something that crosses over from technology into special education. So we'll have to consider that as well. And before we move on to the next slide, I just also want to say how proud I am of all of our students who serve our students with extensive support needs. There's a lot of question marks about how students who are, students with moderate to severe learning needs are going to be able to be successful learners through an online platform. And I'm really proud of the work that our teachers and specialists did. They actually did manage to do some amazing things in moving their instruction online. And it was really cool to see that and see how they were able to conduct classes through Zoom and Google Meet. Okay, next slide. And so again, this is going to raise a lot more questions than it answers. I think just it's important to note that we have an incoming director of special education who is going to be working with district leadership and consulting with county leadership at our SELPA about what to do about our obligations to provide students with free and appropriate public education, or FAPE. IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is still the law of the land. Just to give you a little background, our outgoing special education director and our SPED leadership team sent a prior written notice to families at the beginning of the at-home learning period, basically telling them that FAPE, as outlined in their students' IEP, will not be able to be implemented because those offers of FAPE were based on, in-person instruction, the standard school day that we're accustomed to, and not based on, the online learning platform, which, the minutes aren't the same, all of the services can't be implemented in the same way. So the question now that we're going to work on is determining whether or not we want our offers of FAPE to be modeled after the schedule that we implement this year. And each IEP is a contract with each family based on each student's individual needs. So we'll need to make those decisions with each family and each student and their individual needs in mind. And I also just want to mention, and just, I think it's really important for us to use this as a touchstone. All of our students are gen ed students first. So, our education specialists are there to work with the families and assess the students to determine what services those students should receive, and then, consult with the general education teachers. But ultimately, it's the general education teachers who have to be implementing those services. And so I think it's just important to keep in mind that we're talking about general education students, first and foremost, who receive special education services. And special ed is a service, not a place. That's another important touchstone. The last thing on here is develop protocols for psychologists to conduct assessments. That should also say specialists and teachers. So our assessments drive, that data drives our IEP decisions, and every student every 3 years has a triennial IEP. And for our initial IEPs as well, we have to conduct standardized assessments that may not be feasible to conduct online. So using plexiglass and other ways of keeping things safe, we need to consider how we're going to create a testing space for students and these specialists. And then also for conducting IEPs, we'll want to create a protocol for how to do that. That would largely be able to be done virtually. And we would need to create a protocol for how to obtain signatures and maintain confidentiality with the paperwork and things of that nature. And that's it here. But of course, like I said, I think that this probably raises a lot of questions. And so if I am able to answer any of them, I will be here for that.
Before any questions, I want to call on Ms. Baswino to talk about athletics.
Good evening, everyone. Before I start talking about athletics, I just want to do a little shout out to Lee and Grace, who are our program specialists for this year, who I can't imagine have gone through this crisis without them. What they have done for our district and their expertise and how well they know the parents and how well they know their job. And they've been awesome. So I just want to give a shout out to Lee and Grace. Fall competition right now, CIF, I think they are meeting this weekend to try to come up with some guidelines. They still don't have anything in regards to fall sports. I did share with the board our, little draft of what could possibly summer conditioning guidelines for athletics and activities. We have the same concerns. CIF has posted some guidelines, state and county guidelines for childcare. And and our concerns are the same that you've been hearing all evening, which are, you know, student safety and resources. But it is something that we are currently looking at. It's going to take some time to see if we can get all of what we need in place to make sure the staff and students are safe.
Thank you. And now I'll open it up for clarification questions before technology.
Up to Mr. Pinty.
Yes, thank you. Actually, a question about special education. So this semester, I teach in special education, and of course, IEPs are a challenge. We did a lot of it online. I can imagine the number of questions, and I guess when we have you know, new leadership in our district, that way we'll have a better idea where we're going to go. I guess my question would be, what is going to be the focus of our, you know, how we're leading with that? Because I know with IEPs, I mean, you're looking at the last 3 months of the school year now, and going through summer, you know, without some kind of support follow-up, regardless of whether they have extended school year needs. A lot of our students are going to be walking into next year still lacking the support, you know, due to, you know, FAPE, the limit of, you know, whatever we can provide under the current circumstances. Can we, I guess my question would be, is the drive of our focus going to circle around, you know, is it revolve around compliance, or more about instruction and modifying goals and classroom needs around students' needs? Because I think the ramifications of COVID is going to last more than a year. And so a lot of our students are going to need extra support. And I would like to look at that as a focus in the IEP process. But I'm just curious if there are any ideas right now, absent new leadership direction.
Well, our previous director said something that really stuck with me. You know, when this first started, we didn't know how long it was going to last. And she said, you know, we're really having to build the plane while we fly it to figure out how to, you know, stay compliant, but even more importantly, make sure our students are supported, which you're, you know, speaking to now. And I think that looking at the schedule options, you know, that's going to have a big impact on, you know, how we provide services. I think it's awesome that we're looking at creative, option one being so radically different from the norm. Maybe we can be a little bit more radically different with how we deliver services, you know. Maybe we have to look at, and each site has to decide how best to utilize our specialists and study skills, you know, through this platform. So, and whether or not we can or should adjust our offers of FAPE based on, you know, this adopted, the adopted schedule. That means we're going to be looking at, okay, what kind of services are we going to write into our IEPs now? You know, it's going to look a little bit different. And so our staff will also need support, and we'll have to maybe, you know, work with our SELPA on determining, you know, what's going to be written into the IEP as our agreement with the families about what we can provide their students in order to help them access their education.
Just as a quick follow-up, thank you, that was helpful. What kind of support for our teachers and instructional aides in special education, I guess particularly our teachers in terms of case managing and having time to essentially rewrite IEPs? I mean, it's going to take a lot of restructuring, especially when we talk about FAPE and services and minutes, of course. So will be allotting extra time for them, like instructional days, maybe like, you know, PD days where they can focus on that, and even have days where they can maybe lead PDs for the rest of the teachers so that they can understand how to better implement?
I mean, the decisions about PDs are kind of, you know, not my decisions to make, but I will say that, you know, staff will need guidance and support on case management. And these last 3 months, we created a case management FAQ based on, you know, based on what we knew then. But again, knowing that this is going to be extended, I think, you know, that's, I would say, think that we need to provide a lot of professional development. But when and how that happens isn't for me necessarily to say. I don't know if someone else wants to jump in.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Ochbini?
I was gonna say thank you if anybody else wanted to clarify, but yeah, thank you.
Okay. The only comment that I have, because we're getting late, is that depending on your student and the student needs, I mean, I know that it can be challenging sometimes to have, as a parent, to have your student home all day. So what support that we can give to parents, and hope maybe trying harder to connect them to each other, having maybe some parent support group Zooms. So maybe they can connect with each other and get ideas on best practices and how they've been able to go through this successfully with their students. If I don't know if that something like that has been thought about, or what is being done right now to offer support to parents.
I think that's something that we can really explore. I know that Ms. Garrett, brought that up at the beginning of at-home learning is, how do we provide supports for parents and support groups, because we need to provide, support for them as much as, our students. So that's something that we will explore in our return to school committee as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I'll talk about this later in future agenda items, but it would be nice to have either added onto a future agenda or a work study on the plan for special education, maybe also including English language learners, just to have a deeper dive into that. I mean, it was hard to go into that tonight. This is just kind of an overview, but it would be nice to get more information, because that is areas that we are particularly being challenged for by the state of California. And so I would just like to be extremely as well-versed as possible in those two areas.
Put that down. Thank you.
Anything else?
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Baca.
All right. Now we have Mr. Meyer to talk about technology.
Good evening, members of the board and anybody that's still left on this meeting. So from the technology part of the return to school committee, the biggest concern was, as Ms. Baca mentioned earlier, getting the devices into the hands of the students that are most in need. Back in March, when everything shut down, we really scrambled to get what we could to the people that reached out, and then we kind of circled back and tried to we did phone dialer messages in multiple languages. We sent out emails through mass notification, reaching out to our free and reduced families to find out who needed internet access at home. And I know Ms. Emmendorfer experienced some of the same things we did at the district office, where we would hear back from people and then couldn't get a hold of them to actually get them the device. The ones we did hear back from, we delivered to their house, but it's been a pretty big challenge trying to get in touch with the families that we reached and are in need. So we're hoping that if we spin the or move the distribution out to the sites through the libraries, that we'll be able to reach more students and get them the information they need on, how to check it out, and if you have a problem, what's the protocol for that. And we'll also include instructions in multiple languages on how to connect to the hotspots. We have 200 hotspots ready to go for this next school year. So I'm excited and hope that we can get them in more hands of the students that are in need. We also opened up the JUHSD web help desk to students some time ago for support with getting on the Wi-Fi. So we expanded that just for help with anything. They could request hotspots through the help desk. And we also provided Log Me and Rescue to our technicians to kind of extend the reach of support that we can provide into homes and different devices. It pretty much does everything but phones. It'll do Chromebooks, PCs, Macs. So that's been a great tool in helping our support staff connect with our families, our students and our staff that are in need. Once we started handing out devices, we also realized that we're kind of just giving them a device with no way to filter it outside of our network. So we partnered with a company called LineWise and upgraded to their content filter, which allows us to filter devices that we hand out and are at home. It also provides filtering anytime that somebody is logged into their JUHSD Google account. So it's kind of blanket filtering any device that would be logged into our Google domain, and as well as the Chromebooks that we handed out. Ms. Robinson came up with some good videos and guidance on Zoom and Google Meet protocols. We also signed on with Nearpod sometime last year, and we're expanding it into digital citizenship training for the devices that are the students that are taking devices home. Some of the things that we're looking at, we're researching ways to measure the amount of time students spend during at-home learning. And I also attended a Synergy webinar that highlighted the new features that are coming out. And one of them is a remote attendance self-reporting and a contact tracing feature. They also have a pretty cool Zoom integration that we're looking into. That's pretty much all I have.
Thank you so much. Opening up for comments, questions. No? Okay. So I want to say to you, Jake, just so much respect and worship. Thank you for everything that you've done. It has been a Herculean effort to get all this to work. And then just to really talk about what should have been in place. And again, another area where we're having to step up for society, everyone should have access to the internet. Everyone should have Wi-Fi. Like that should have been the starting place. It should not have been our responsibility to get all that done and to make sure that every student had a laptop. So I'm glad that we stepped in and did that because it's important, but just shout out to the entire IT team and all the work that you guys done to get us up and running. I'm hugely grateful. Thank you.
I will pass that along.
Okay. We have Ms. Ambrose for the health and wellness part of the presentation.
Hi, everyone. And really honored to be here with all of you. And it's been an epically long meeting already. So I just have like a lot of respect for the fact that you guys are, because this is a lot of learning on your part. And so for the kind of attention that's required to a meeting like this. So I was on the Health and Wellness Committee with Monica Casey and Tiffany Hong from Circle Up. I feel like we had one more person, but I'm not remembering, so I apologize. A little scary there in my brain.
We also had Victoria, parent.
Oh yeah, really wonderful parent named Victoria. Yeah, she was fab. So thank you, Corrine. And we did a whole section on this slide, and I'm not going to really spend a lot of time on it because it's come up many other times during tonight's meeting, which is that like very obviously there's many health and safety and hygiene protocols that are going to have to be established. And then students will have to be trained on them because you can't just put protocols in place and then expect students to understand them. Staff are also going to have to be trained on them. And they're just the very obvious, basic, maybe they're not very obvious. There's the ones that are going to be required by the Department of Public Health, and then other ones, and you probably have all been places where there's now little arrows on the floor. You know, there's options about one-way hallways. There was a lot of talk about what we would do if a student was sick and how they would go home. And we didn't sit around, we didn't make protocols for all that yet, because many of the protocols will be made by the county. And then we'll have to work with, like, obviously the admin at each high school will work on things that are really school specific. And so that was that particular, this is that particular slide, but really just like sort of rest assured, that slide, the content of it was on everybody's mind in every group, right? So it was like this constant sort of coming back, like, how are we going to bring human beings together in spaces again? The slide, of course, that you can imagine that I am most concerned about is the student staff wellness supports. And we had a lot of ideas, but I think the most important takeaway from our group is that the mental health and well-being of both staff and students is really going to be, it's always been a beautiful priority of this district. I have deep respect for this district, and one of the reasons I've stayed in this district for over 20 years is because of the emphasis on the whole human being. But there's going to have to be a far greater emphasis on the whole human being. The trauma of COVID is finally starting to catch up with us. And then the trauma, the historical trauma of systemic racism, and then also just the current trauma. And I've talked to 2 students in the last week of seeing images over and over and over and over on public media and the news. And not only the recent images of the murders, but images that people are bringing images and replaying stuff from the recent past is a very painful. And it, as you all know, this Zoom meeting alone isn't, our prefrontal cortex and our mirror neurons are not, we are not soothing each other's nervous systems. We want to be soothing each other's nervous systems, but it doesn't work. The human being is designed to be in community. It wasn't maybe designed to be in community with, you know, hundreds of thousands of other people, but like we came out of, you know, small tribe groups, and we're not with each other in the same way. And so I think our biggest issue my group talked about was, how are we going to work with that? So what kinds of supports are we going to offer staff? Are we going to offer like actual support groups? What kinds of PD are we going to offer staff to deal with what they're going to see in their classrooms? What kinds of, how are we going to support staff to hold space and on a really tier 1 way for the hardship that students are living with right now, the economic distress, the personal distress, how hard it is for them to be isolated, how hard it is for them, many of our students live through this socio-political time. And then when we do that, we're asking adults to hold a lot when adults have a lot going on also. So there's a staff member, for example, that I'm in close contact with, and his partner small business has not been able to open back up. And so we have a lot of tending to do and a lot of thinking about how we're going to be able to hold this community. And I'll just say from a Melissa point of view, not from my committee's point of view, I actually think that academics and traditional learning should be really at the bottom of our priority list. And I'm just speaking totally for myself. I'm not speaking on behalf of the committee. You guys all know me really well. I think that learning is not important right now. I think what's important is human connectedness and well-being. And that is a tall order during these times of profound uncertainty, because the human being does not like to not know what's happening. It's very scary for many of us. So I think our biggest concern was like, how are we going to do that? And how are we going to leverage the expertise within the community? So we have a lot of people. We have wellness counselors that are trained in trauma-informed practices, and we have school counselors that are trained that way. But at the same time, those practices need to be examined for any implicit, which there is for sure, white supremacist sort of ideas. We have to really unpack a lot of stuff right now. We have to really understand that the school system is just rife with issues, as you guys all know. And then we have to be really thoughtful and tender about how to move forward with supporting people. And so we didn't actually come up with a lot of brilliant ideas for that yet, but we really sort of were more calling out our concerns. And our group was hugely concerned with, and this will be the last thing I say, like, what is real issues of equity? What are the real issues of equity? So we personally think our schedules and our programs should be built around the students that have the most unmet needs first. And how to do that is very complicated and hard to figure out. And I feel really disturbed about the timeline. We don't have enough time to do this well. And one of the things that we do a lot of times when we don't have enough time is we rush, and that rushing harms usually the most, the students with the least, the least basic needs met. So our group didn't have a lot of answers. We had a lot of questions, and we had really deep and thoughtful conversations. We're not throwing it out there as an unanswered group. We're throwing it out there as this has got to be an ongoing conversation, and we're going to do this perfectly imperfect. This entire thing is going to be done. The only thing we're going to do perfect about it is to totally mess it up. And that's just the way it's going to be, because we're learning as we go, and we're being asked to do an impossible task, again, with no financial backing. So that's my soapbox. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Go ahead and preach too. I'm here for it. Opening it up for comments and questions. Checking to see if there's word. Okay. Ms. Christensen?
I just wanted to throw it out there. Preach. I thought that was great, Melissa. That came up a lot with the kids that we spoke to in all our different groups. They have an enormous amount of angst around coming back. Not just the academic side, actually the social side of everything. I even noticed it in my own kids who got to see their cousins for the first time in a few months. They didn't even know how to act with them. It was extremely awkward and uncomfortable. So when these kids do get back in the classroom, they have so many things on their mind that they haven't been able to process with their peers or their teachers or the people that they trust on the school campuses. And I agree. I think mental health is first and foremost for these kids. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, and we just, so you know, little minutia things we discussed. Wellness counselors, most of us, and school counselors don't have 6 feet of space in our offices. My old office at Oceana, I don't know, it's maybe it was 4 feet between the student. And also, again, all the therapist friends I know right now are struggling because doing Zoom therapy is not, again, it's not nearly as connected. And then if you do therapy in person and you have a mask on, you're missing all the microfacial expressions with the brain is constantly registering. And the vagus, the nervous system, the soothe and digest part of the nervous system isn't going to track all that. So most therapists don't know, we're all, how do we even, like you said, Michaela, how do we actually literally and not, metaphorically hold people right now? The good news is we have a bunch of mental health interns. We have 1 for each school next year. It's the first time we've ever had that. And then the Daly City Youth Health Center has 6 interns. And so we'll have even more, we have more mental health support than we've ever had. Can we get the student? Yeah, it's wonderful and exciting. I feel really sad that we're likely going to be in at-home learning because we've had a hard time getting the students to engage. They don't want to talk to counselors when their little brother, sister, aunt, uncle, mom, dad, grandma is right around the corner behind them.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Ochapinti?
Yes, thank you for all that. That is, just rounding out everything, I think what everybody's saying, all these pieces to returning to school are major, but in a lot of ways, it's like you said, it's like returning to life, right? As school districts were setting the tone for society reopening, the pace of it in many ways, and even the tone of it. So the social and economic, I mean, we don't even know what the economy is going to look like, this summer, let alone the fall. So those impacts and having a space to talk about it, I totally agree. And we see it in special education, you can't even get started. It's on the chat there. Keisha pointing out that, you have to address student wellness before you even get to the academics. That's absolutely the truth. And I think, as we get started in August, it's also an election year, and everything they're seeing in terms of, the trauma of, everything that, we're getting through. They're also a generation that's watching, the seniors graduate into a changing world and feeling like they want to be a part of it. So the resilience we talk about with our students, I think we should also be mindful of the trauma, like you mentioned, and trying to create more proactive ways to discuss and engage these issues in our classes and in the curriculum, and to put that first. I think in my experience, this past semester with my students, a lot of them, we would talk about the assignment, and do the interactive learning online, but they'd always ask questions about, what was going on and how, talking about how their family's doing. Their minds are in a million places. And so if we can meet our students halfway and kind of build our curriculum around their experiences and keep it student-centered, moving with the students who have the highest need first, I think that's exactly where we need to start. And I look forward to, everything that can be built around that, even if we don't have the physical spaces for it yet. So thank you for all that.
All right, moving on.
Great. Okay, our last part is school operations, Ms. Basuino and Ms. Cruz.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for your time, your patience, and the opportunity to present tonight. This first slide here addresses numerous aspects of school operations that our group discussed in detail over the past several weeks. Some of them, many of them have been touched upon this evening, so I'll try to keep it really, really brief. Let's see. As stated on the slide, staff will be doing screenings digitally before reporting to work. Ms. Basuino has already met with site administrators and started conversations a couple of weeks ago addressing daily student screenings. Each site will go ahead and develop their own processes for how this will be conducted and how to identify those who have and have not been screened. The process is still pretty fluid, and the course of action will depend on both the number of students at each site and the county guidelines. Student and staff bathrooms. Bathroom protocols will need to be implemented to reduce overcrowding of bathrooms at any one time, taking into consideration, again, the layouts of each site. Sites will need to decide if students will be allowed to use restrooms, say, during passing periods. If they do use restrooms during passing periods, they may have to increase the amount of passing period time. And if they don't use the restrooms during passing period, how is that going to affect classes and teachers? Use of lockers and locker rooms will be assessed on a site-by-site basis. It is possible that lockers may be eliminated for the time being, while considering other options for SPED students and medically fragile students. But if students are participating in 3 classes per day, they'll have less books to cart back and forth, so that might be a possible option. As far as PE, if it's decided that students are not dressing out for PE, then the PE lockers and locker rooms could actually be closed off. This could reduce cleaning workload for maintenance staff. Let's see, we will not be using any common areas at this time, and we'll follow safety protocols as we move forward in reopening those areas. Let's see, we will set up protocols to manage student safety. This might include signage throughout school sites, reinforcing the 4 pillars, general instructions for passing periods, the marking of hallways that was discussed earlier, etc. We'll also be setting and communicating guidelines to ensure staff safety. Let's see, students training will be assessed along with the protocols to manage the staff safety. So let's see, student orientation. There was a large discussion on student orientation. I think that each site is placing some special focus on the new student orientation. And I would say current guidelines for San Mateo right now allow for groups of students up to 50 at one time. So if all of the students are going to be in-person student orientation, it'll have to be done over several days. If all students are not going to be having in-person orientation, they may decide to limit it to special ed students or English language learners. That's pretty much what I have it squished down to a quick presentation. I'm going to give it over to Doreen.
Saving the best for last. Good news is there's only 2 slides left. So, you know, it's mostly what we talked about before. There's nothing new on this slide that you haven't already heard all evening. Just the fact that a lot of what we put on place on the campuses will be, you know, directed by county office and us at the county office. I mean, not the county office, but from the district office, from the county, from health. And it's just up to us at the district office to make sure that our admin have the most up-to-date information so that they're keeping their staff and students safe.
All right, I'm gonna go for the next slide, which is the next steps. So what we're trying to do is develop a plan for engaging students through AB 77. Develop a plan for phasing in students on campus. So we talked about our English learner students with IEP, and our 9th grade students. The school sites will have to develop school operation plans using the guidance from the county and the state, monitor the COVID data, identify the parents and students who would like to participate fully in AHL, and identify staff who are unable or fearful of being on campus. Research some childcare options for staff, provide PD to staff on effective remote teaching, develop some how-to videos for students, parents, and staff, figure out some ways on how our non-teaching staff can be used to assist with distance learning. And we will be asking our sites to submit a site operation plan by July 31st. So with that, I'm gonna stop my screen, and that is the end.
Okay, so we have 4 attendees still here. You guys are rock stars. Way to make it through this marathon. I don't know if you all want to speak. If you do, you just put your name in the chat. First person that has done so is Andrew Hombre. So I open it up to you. If you can be unmuted, or if you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I'll be real quick. Good evening, district board members and executive cabinet. I first want to extend my congratulations to the class of 2020 and all the school sites for their resilience during this time and completing the school year. I want to recognize and applaud the work of many of our students from our districts. And after hearing such tragic events happen in our communities across the world, the death of George Floyd and many others. For instance, Jefferson High School BSU and their president, Jordan Hill, leading a protest at City Hall was definitely an empowering moment. I would also like to acknowledge Westmore class officers, Rachel Jian, Megan Ho, Jerry Tran, and Kian Hondo, who organized a petition to make their voices heard for their graduation. As you can see, these students have gone above and beyond to make their voices heard. I come to you tonight as a teacher from Westmore High School who wants to do more to support our students. I have been communicating with other teachers within and outside my school site, and they feel the same way. How can we as educators support students in becoming active citizens within our community? Teachers from Westmore and Jefferson High School have been discussing ways to address social justice and anti-racism in our schools. One event we are proposing is to help organize a youth-led voter awareness community event. We envision this event to be a place where we as teachers are able to create spaces for students to initiate authentic dialogue, discussion, and awareness about various aspects of the November 2020 election cycle. This could include understanding propositions like schools and communities first, in addition to local candidate platforms. It could also be an event where students participate actively, such as voter registration or volunteering with polling. The mission is to have this event primarily directed and facilitated by the youth, and to invite the community to participate with the help of the Youth Leadership Initiative. Many of its members are students in our own school sites. We have organized an event like this in the past with our city council members and collaborated with YLI, so setup and investment from the community would be within our capacity. What we would like to see from the board is, one, help provide a venue for an event, whether it be a physical location or a digital forum. Two, promote the event to all school sites. Three, provide suggestions of organizations to speak on propositions or candidates on the ballot. And four, have the event organized by YLI and facilitated by students. This is just the beginning stage of the planning process, and we will update you as things progress. We hope that this event can be a starting point for our community to make informed voting decisions and be a launching point for other initiatives, such as creating a space to promote social justice and an ethnic studies curriculum in our schools. I feel like our community needs an uplift, and this event can help provide that. Hopefully we can have your support. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, next up is Sean Karkazis. I'm saying it right, I'm sorry.
Oh, I think you meant to unmute my husband.
Oh, you guys have the same, you're showing the same name on the screen.
I'm
Do you want to
sorry.
just go now? No, it's okay. Why don't you just go now and then we'll do your husband next.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, first off, thank you guys for hosting this. I know it's been a long night, but thank you for letting us, speak up. My name is Ashley Karkazis. I'm a volunteer at Terra Nova High School, and I'm here to kind of plead for remote learning to continue until at least we have like a vaccine or more safer measures. I understand this is challenging, but I also know what it's like to be to have to be creative in the midst of a crisis. In 2015, I was diagnosed with leukemia and underwent a stem cell transplant, and I'm still taking chemotherapy and immunosuppressants. Before diagnosis, I had gone back to school to start a degree in biology, but after being diagnosed, I had to medically withdraw from classes for treatment and had to be in both quarantine and isolation for over a year. A year later, my doctors approved me to go back to school in an online setting only. Now, I can tell you that being a science major and only being able to take online classes has been difficult, from the lack of availability of science courses to the lack of understanding and resources for someone in my predicament. However, it is possible. This past spring, after 5 years of online classes, I was finally approved to be on campus for SFSU's teaching credential program. However, in March, when COVID-19 cases began to rise, my oncologist ordered me to withdraw from the credential program entirely. Furthermore, I was told that I would no longer be allowed on a school campus in any capacity, including volunteering my time at TN. Volunteering and interacting with my students and the faculty there has brought so much joy in my life, and it breaks my heart that I can't be alongside them this school year. This is the second time I've had to stop my future due to my health and safety. I am one of the invisible faces that is vulnerable to this virus, and I wouldn't be alive if it weren't for my partner, Sean Carcases, who teaches at Terra Nova. During treatment and currently, if Sean were to become ill, he would not be able to stay in our house. There have been multiple occasions in the past where he has had to stay with relatives, and I've had to forego my caregiver's help. We have missed out on weddings, celebrations, funerals because of my immune deficiency. We have had to explain to so many people why we can't give them a hug, why they can't pet our dog, why we can't eat off a buffet or share food. People would even say that they would hug my partner for me since they couldn't hug me, but what they don't realize is that a virus can easily be passed on to a loved one. I know some of you now know the feeling of not being able to be with your loved ones right now, and I want you to know I get it. I know the feeling of not being able to lay in the same bed with your partner or being able to hug or kiss them. I know the effects isolation and quarantine can have on one's mental health. I know the procedure of indoor clothes and shoes and wiping down your groceries. I know what it feels like to have to wear an N95 mask in public. And I know these things because this has been the reality of my life for the past 5 years. It pains me to know that the rest of you in society have to experience these uncomfortabilities, but today I'm begging you to please protect me and my family and my friends, my students, and yourselves. There have been incredible innovations and technological advancements emerging during this pandemic. San Mateo College City District science departments have created online lab simulations through LabStar, or they've had professors go into a lab alone and record a lesson for their students. These implementations are possible without the presence of a traditional class setting. I urge you to please invest in these new methods and not risk the exposure of this virus to our students and their families, to teachers and faculties, especially since we don't have a vaccine. Please do not make me spend one more night without my partner next to me or make us question if it's even safe to be next to each other. Please do not make my partner choose between his dream career as a teacher and the safety of his family. I have fought for 5 long years to stay alive, and I just do not want that battle to be in vain. So please also think about equity among teachers. At least give those teachers who don't have the option to come onto campus, allow them an option to still do remote learning, because this is serious for our family. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Ashley. You've been heard here, and I know this has been a struggle for you, and I'm grateful for everything that both you and your husband have done and brought to the district. So thank you for sticking with us and sharing that tonight. Next up is your husband.
Mute. Okay. I don't know if you can hear me. We good?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Okay. I'm going to keep this short. Obviously, this has been a long meeting, and my wife is amazing, and I love her very much. Okay. So first off, I would like to say I miss my classroom. I really do. I miss my students. I miss everything about it. And in this trying time with so much going on, I really need to see them, and I really need to work with them. But unfortunately, I just don't feel it's safe. As of this moment right now, our county is pushing numbers of 3,232 cases. That's roughly, and I do mean roughly, the same as the country of Thailand. Of a population of 70 million people, our county is doing the same. Actually, our county is doing worse. They are projecting 50 people have died. We have 108 people. I just see these things as something where we are exposing more and more issues. And the thought of losing a student breaks my heart. And I just want to be safe. The one thing I want for my students is safety. It's the best thing we can give to them. And unfortunately, this is just not getting better. If we look at the stats from the original really bad pandemic we had in 1918, the United States lost 600,000 people in a matter of 4 years. Granted, there's no vaccine at that time. And I know we're relying heavily on the government telling us that we're going to have a vaccine by possibly December. But I just hope that maybe we could possibly push a semester back of at-home learning and then hit it hard in January. I realize it's a mess, but I do believe just one life is enough. If we open the door to students, regardless of what's going to happen, it's inevitable that people are going to get sick. And when they get sick, it is going to be our fault for doing this. Now, I understand all these different things going on. I understand it's not safe. I understand that we're having equity issues. I understand the technology is not quite there, but bringing people back in the classrooms isn't necessarily the safest thing at this time. And I just want to say thank you for everything you guys have done. And I know you guys are dealing with the hardest thing possible. This really is. And I respect the fact that you guys have stayed on this thing for 3 hours discussing these matters and trying to do this in a safe measure. And I just want to say I am a part of the team and I will do whatever I can. And I do believe that my family and my students are my number one priority. And I know that's how it is in the district as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other attendees that would like to address the board?
I believe those are the three.
All right, perfect. I will open it up for board comments or discussion now. Trustee Lee?
Thanks. Lot of stuff has been popping in my mind over the course of these past 3.5 hours. First off, I want to say thank you to every single one of the members of this committee. You guys did amazing, incredible work to prepare this presentation. And for me, it's humbling to know the care with which every single one of you put into this. It's humbling to know how much thought went into this for every single focus group, focus area. The reason I didn't really speak much was really because the work you had done was so complete for me, and you answered a lot of the questions that I would have already had. And so I was really grateful for the care that you guys put into this. Melissa Ambrose, I think, said it best. This is going to be perfectly imperfect. And so regardless of which schedule goes forward and how we approach it, whether it is the split schedule that's being recommended, for example, we're going to need to extend each of us a lot of grace, right? We're going to make mistakes along the way. It's going to be messy, and guess what? It's going to be okay. You know, when I look at what we're trying to do here, you know, part of this is we're also reliant upon the larger JUHSD community to do its part, to adhere to the health guidelines. It's a community behavioral change that we should all be doing. And the reality is, to pick up on what Mr. Carcazes has been saying, we know that a lot of our community really isn't doing their job. And the best we can do is to try and mitigate this risk, and because we won't have a risk-free environment if we were to be back in the classroom. You know, and we know that there's going to be community members who want one thing or the other. We've seen it in the data. But my question to the larger community, to the parents, to just general community members, are they willing to help? Are they willing to do their part to make this, to help mitigate the risk for us if we're going to properly educate our kids? You know, anecdotal evidence suggests that, certainly I've seen on social media, that there are many people in our community, many parents who aren't masking or who aren't social distancing and are getting together. And if the parents can't behave, how can we expect their students to behave? And that's the part that's been disappointing to me over the past few weeks. You know, when I see the data in the county and in the state going the way it is, it's pretty disheartening. So, you know, I think, you know, this sort of leads me to believe that, I mean, And Dr. Deloria has already said it earlier, and several others have said it. I mean, the likelihood, given the way everything's trending, is we're probably going to start the year at home anyway. But I'm really grateful for for the work that all of you have done. So thank you.
Thank you. So Ms. Garrett, it's hard for me to see you when you raise your hand. So if you could use the raise hand feature too, that'd be nice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'll figure it out. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. It's all good. It's late.
I know. I just want to make it quick and sweet. I don't really have any, I think Andy said it best, and I thank you all for all the work that you've done to put into this. I think, everybody's showing that the main importance here is the health and well-being of all of us in the district, staff, teacher, all of our community. So whatever I think we need to do, whatever we need to do to be healthy and safe, I fully support it. So thank you for all the work that you've done. To all of you to get us all through, all the community to get through this. So thank you.
I see you, Ms. Casey. I'm gonna, any other board members that want to speak right now? Mr. Ochapenti?
She can go first, this one.
Ms. Casey?
Just a couple of little last comments. Is I really appreciated when Dr. Deloria said that we need to look at data and science, not popular belief, to determine that it's safe to return to campus. So I really want to emphasize that, science and data. And then the second thing is, I want us to think about, as long as we're still meeting this way, if we continue to meet through Zoom, we shouldn't even think about going back to school if we're still meeting this way. If the adults are meeting on Zoom, then we should not even think about sending our students back in. Of course, with a few necessary things we might need to do, get some kids on campus just because they've never seen their teachers, or some little things. But if the adults are doing this, then we need to really think about sending our kids into a place that's not safe. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Ochapenti?
Yeah. Yeah, not to repeat what everybody's been saying. I agree with all of it. I think one of the things we have to remember is, it's not our job to get the economy back running. It's our job, to make sure that, everybody gets what they need, and providing those basic services. School districts, we're doing a lot. And so I just want to give a huge thanks to everybody who's been working on this committee and putting this together. Like Trustee Lee was saying, the things that we can ask from our district, I think are things we've been asking from each other this entire spring and into the summer, and to address, the teachers and people, that had concerns speaking, how we get involved and how can we be safe and stay healthy. I can't speak for the committee. I can say, on my part that I do agree. I think we can start the school year online. I can't see why that wouldn't be an option, or even long term. And there has been discussion, of course, other districts have, every district's different, every community is different, but perhaps there are ways where our teachers and our staff can work remotely, and some of our students certainly may have the same concerns, and I don't see why that wouldn't be possible. So just to put that out there. But beyond that, I think that, getting students involved and being proactive for those who can and will want to be a part of, furthering dialogue along, helping our community in many ways that, were mentioned. Definitely look forward to it. We do have a meeting tomorrow night. I'll let somebody else, I guess, explain more about that. But yeah, I am looking forward to it. And thank you everybody for your input tonight. It's been very, very helpful. And we should keep this conversation going. I think we can.
Absolutely. Ms. Tejada?
I want to thank Ashley and Sean Carcazes for sticking with us this long tonight. And as Ashley was talking, I'm also a double cancer survivor. So it's hard to keep yourself safe. and I'm immunocompromised. I get nervous going out to do the shopping when I'm the only, it's just me and my daughter right now. So when my son comes home from school, he can do the shopping. but I just want to thank Ashley for being so vulnerable and illustrating to us why it is so important to keep all of us safe. And I as you were talking, I was thinking about visiting you in your classroom when you were getting Tiger News Network up and running, and how excited you were. And for that all to be taken away, it's so sad. And Ms. Ambrose, just the wellness of our students. This is a think tank, but it's our do tank. You guys are doers, and we're doers. We have to think that way. We are leading the county. I mean, we've had this, return to school committee up and running before anyone else has. And Dr. D, thank you for, getting us started so quickly. And because, as I was listening to you talking, and especially when Ms. Christensen was saying that students are afraid to go back to school. And I turned to my daughter, I said, is that true? Because she doesn't share things with me really. And she said, yeah, I don't know what it's going to be like. And she's this easygoing kid, but I don't know what it's going to be like when we go back to school. I don't know how to talk to people anymore. And, we have to know what's best and equitable and safe for our students, and rely on the data and the science before we start putting ourselves at risk. And that's everyone who's going to be on campus. So I just want to thank this whole committee for putting in, God, so much work. It's daunting and it's scary, but I believe in us, and I can't even thank you enough for putting in the extra effort to think about bringing us back to school if we do, in a safe way.
Thank you, Ms. Tejada. So I just want to say that I'm grateful for everyone who presented today. Big shout out to Ms. Baca for pulling this all together. As usual, she's a rock star. I have been a member, I tell her, of the Kareem Baca fan club for years. I think I was the starting founding member, and proud of it. So thank you so much for all of the work that you did to get us together and to do this presentation tonight. I'm also hugely grateful for our superintendent, Dr. Deloria, and all the work that she's been doing ongoing at here and at the county level, and trying to get us steered and on the right course for all the students in the county. And she's been very active at the county office. And so that's added work on top of making all the masks for everybody in the district. So just hugely grateful for our team, our executive cabinet, and our board, who with me have been going to the county call, which was 3-4 times a week. I don't know how many times a week it was, and it was 3 times a week, and then once a week. And then we have our school boards member association call that is once a week. And then we all have full-time jobs, and none of us have gotten fired yet to this point. So, I'm incredibly grateful for the board for putting in the time to be educated on this issue. And, I know it's really late, thank you for joining the JUHSD slumber party tonight, but I just want to make it clear that safety is a #1 issue. And I know I speak for the entire board, safety is a #1 issue. That there has been a lot of pressure put on us, in the different meetings about restarting the economy. And to echo what somebody else said, that is not our job. You know what I mean? Like, we do enough. And, you know, we've already taken over healthcare. We're feeding, you know, we're stepping in and we're feeding their district, the students in our district. And now we're responsible for the economy. It's insanity. If they want the economy to start, there's a federal government for that. Go put that on their doorstep. We are not being paid or given the resources to do the job that we had to do before all this started. Before all this started. And so the ask on school districts who have been defunded a long time ago. So I'm really shocked that police organizations, law enforcement organizations are so repellent of that word, because education has been defunded for years. Have more work laid on their feet and less resources. And so I'm speaking to every state legislator and to everybody in the county. If you can give $1 million to the county sheriffs for tasers, but you can't provide us PPE, then you have no credibility to tell me when I should not open my school district. You need to keep your opinions to yourself. If you're a state legislator, you know, we have been funded at the bare minimum, and they're celebrating themselves that nothing was cut. Yeah, you know, we're in the middle of a crisis and you want us to hold up the entire community. You should be giving us as much money as is possible, not celebrating the fact that you didn't take any additional money from us after being defunded for years. So as Dr. Deloria said, we are working right now to get our own metrics and data from the county so that we have credible science to lean back on, so that we know to find our own definition for our district, because our makeup of our district is different from other areas. So we have different factors that we need to take into consideration on when it's safe for us to open, and when it's safe for us to go back to school. And that for me is the guiding light and the guiding factor. And I would not ask anyone into the district to do anything that I'm not doing myself. So if we're not in person at a board meeting, we are not in person in the classroom. That is my pledge to everyone. So that is my piece. And that's what I want to say on that. And I don't know if anyone else has anything to say. I'll turn it over to Dr. Deloria.
Yeah, so to lighten up a little bit, I found out we have 200 gallons of disinfectant, which I figure will last maybe the first couple of weeks of school. When you think of all the schools, all the dispensers and things like that. I just want to again say thank you to everybody who worked with Corinne and Monica. I know I gave you an impossible task. I'll be honest with you, there are some people at the county level who are tired of my questions and whining, but I keep pressing. I think we can all sleep better at night if we're looking at real data. So Kalima, thank you for helping me push that through. We're trying to get the county to release data to us so we know what's happening locally in Daly City and Pacifica. So the number of daily new cases, but also the hospitalizations. And I'd like to see that by age group as well. So, I mean, that's my commitment to you. And I know people would like to have a decision made before August 3rd. Everyone has to plan anyway, but things can change in a week. You've seen that. We were trending down and then suddenly we had spikes. So I'm hesitant to make a decision in the middle of July when I know 2 weeks, everything can turn around just like that. So I'm hopeful it'll trend down, but we'll see on August 3rd. And just thank you to everybody.
Okay. Future agenda items. I'm like, where is my agenda right now? Okay.
We have one more.
Oh, no, we do have one more item. You're right. We have, I'm sorry, just closed. We have BP 0415 on equity. And this is just a first read, Dr. Deloria.
So this is a new policy by CSBA, and it's completely aligned with the work that we all are doing and want to do anyway. So I wanted to show this to you. I haven't made any changes. It's exactly as CSBA presented to us. What I would like to do, and I hope we can do this by July 6th, but if not, we can always bring it back later. Keisha and Denny were working with a small group on developing our district equity statement. and they presented the board with 3 drafts to consider. I would really like to get a decision on that so we could include it in the policy. We can still approve the policy on July 6th and I can add it later. But are there any questions about the policy? Okay.
Nope.
All right. Just
It's
reminder.
about time. Oh, sorry, Pants. Sorry, Trustee Tejada.
So I don't see, as I was reading it, I don't see anything where we can specifically address gender identity or LGBTQI. I don't see anything specific in it. And I think it's important to cover that. I mean,
okay. Let me look at that and figure out where I can put something like that. I agree with you.
Because I see cultural biases, but that's just not enough.
Okay.
And Rosie, I would just say, go ahead and edit it as much as, because this is from CSBA, who is run by, you've been to all
I've been there.
meetings, you know who we're dealing with.
I'm sure I can find a way, and I want to anyway, so.
Right. I mean, I was just gonna say CSBA, like, way to finally, step up.
Yeah.
Like, this is long overdue. So I'm glad that they just have a BP that they're pushing out to all school districts on equity. So yes, I definitely can change this and make it more specific to our district. All right. Future agenda items. I know we talked about adding special education and English language learners to a future agenda, just so we can have a deeper dive in that, because tonight it's kind of a long meeting. It's kind of hard to do that here. And then Mr. Ochapinti, was that you raising your hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I know last regular meeting we were discussing, talking about ethnic studies and these things. Tomorrow we have a special meeting, so I would hold off on putting it on a future agenda item for another meeting unless we want to put it on now because we're anticipating a follow-up. So I want to see what people thought about that or where we're at with that.
So we do have the meeting tomorrow, and then what I was hoping to do, I think you should have gotten an email anyway, is that we're going to be in the second year of the Equity Committee cohort for San Mateo County School Boards Association, which will include 3 to 4 work studies that Nicole is going to do with us. So those will be set into our calendar. And at those work studies, I thought that would be the perfect place for us to have a deep dive into ethnic studies and other, other things around equity, but definitely spending some time on ethnic studies at one of those planned work studies that we'll have through the year. So it's an ongoing conversation, not just one time in the agenda that we've done in the past. Like, we've had on the agenda, we've talked about it, and then we just kind of moved on. We can have that as a continual discussion.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Motion to adjourn.
There's still.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
Adjourn in memory.
Yep, you're right. Sorry about that. Okay. If my iPad works. Do you want to read it, Ms. Tejada? Because my iPad is giving up on me tonight.
Okay. We adjourn tonight's meeting in honor of Terra Nova alumni Alessandra Stevens. Class of 2017 alumni Alessandra Stevens will be remembered fondly by the faculty and staff of Terra Nova High School as a creative soul. While a student, Allie was a member of our journalism program, drama, and poetry clubs. She'll be remembered as having taken advantage of these creative outlets to express herself through her beautifully written words, which not only expressed her personality, but helped raise awareness amongst her classmates. We, the Board of Trustees of Jefferson Union High School District, send our condolences to the Stevens family, along with a host of their friends and loved ones.
Thank you. And yeah, again, to extend our condolences to the family. That's the hardest thing to go through as a parent, is to lose a child. So she's in our thoughts and our prayers, and we send our love to our family to get them the peace to get through this time. Okay, so am I forgetting anything else? No? Good to go. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Hi.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Go to bed. Bye.